This guy has a unique ability that lets him see numbers floating above people's heads. But what are these numbers? It's exactly how many people this person has killed or will kill in the future. OMC is marked by something that goes way beyond what we see on his face. And to get revenge for his past, he decided to kill everyone who's destined to become a... And he only has one rule. If a person's only gonna kill one person in their life, it's not worth it. It'd just be trading one life for another. It'd be a waste of time. But what if that person's gonna kill 2 or 200 people? It goes after those monsters. But wait, how many people has he killed by now? Isn't he the monster now? Our main character is known as Number, the most wanted serial killer in Korea. The police are putting everything into finding this monster who, secretly, does all of this for a good reason. Or maybe, good reasons just aren't enough. The story starts when the news was warning about the killer's latest victim, who was still on the run even after more than 20 murders. Even though all the victims were from the same city, there was no connection between them. It seemed all victims were chosen at random. As these news reports echoed in her head, a woman looked at the portrait of her recently murdered sister. A few days later, the grieving woman, Sela, was working in an... She saw more news about the serial killer's victims. It was leaving her completely exhausted, until a colleague's voice brought her back to reality. Her colleague, June, was worried and asked if she had a migraine. After work, they went to a restaurant with other co-workers. The girl commented that she was better now and had just been a little distracted earlier. Yoon remained concerned, saying that the last time she wasn't well, she even ended up throwing up. Another colleague thought it best to leave Se alone. It hadn't been long since it happened. With a sad look, Se remembered her deceased sister, drinking with them just a few days ago. In these memories, the woman seemed very loud, which only increased Se's shock when she had to see her sister's body in a morgue. She had to identify her poor sister's body, noticing she looked even paler than usual. Her hand hung from the gurney. And the young woman noticed the number 2 carved into the lifeless hand. That was certainly the work of the Number serial killer, the most notorious in Korea at the time. Returning to the present, June asked how many had already fallen victim to the criminal. More than 30. Meanwhile, the colleague agreed that the number was only growing, including crimes committed to imitate the serial killer. Another young woman was disillusioned. It seemed the police weren't paying attention to what was happening. The colleague agreed they were a bunch of good-for-nothings who deserved to die. For Se, it no longer made a difference. None of it would bring her dear sister back. As a journalist, covering a case after a robbery or murder had occurred seemed futile now. They should eliminate the problem at its root. There had to be a way to identify potential criminals before they harmed society. Couldn't they kill these people before they could hurt anyone? These thoughts hadn't left her mind in recent days. As they were heading home, June called out to his friend, asking her to be careful on her way back, passing through streets with security cameras. He also commented that maybe she would feel better if she went out with someone. Possibly thinking of himself, she just smiled and said goodbye to her friend. Meanwhile, someone was watching them from atop a building. Back to analyzing crime scenes, Se heard news about the victims having no connection. The only thing they ended up having in common was a number carved somewhere on their bodies. No one knew if the killer was a single person or a group, or if there was any motive behind these crimes. This was unlike anything seen so far. There were no witnesses. It was rare for people to see the criminal and get out alive. Interviewing the witness of Murder 21, the woman had said that several coincidences occurred. She had gone out to dinner at a restaurant and, on her way back, passed through a street she didn't usually take. It was on this path that she ended up becoming a witness, seeing the criminal standing in front of a bloody man. Meanwhile, the young man who witnessed the decimotercera crime swore there were more people on the street. But when he realized, everyone seemed to have vanished. Except for the person who was chasing. It seemed the man knew exactly what they were going to do, as if he could see the future. Se wondered how these witnesses had survived. Why had the criminal let them go when they could tell what they had seen? The first witness heard the man's voice and thought she would die right there, but he just said her number was 1 and that she wasn't his target. Se wanted more details, but the police wouldn't even reveal the number carved into the victims' bodies, for security reasons. It was very strange how such a criminal could exist in Korea, without even hiding bodies or silencing witnesses. Her email was overflowing with tips sent about the investigation. But only one caught her attention, seeming truly important. Curious to know more, she immediately called the sender. That night, Se was excited. The lead was even better than she had thought. As she walked, distracted by these thoughts, someone watched her from afar. Then the smile vanished from her face. As she realized someone was following her and getting closer, Se remembered the words of the young man who witnessed the 13th crime, saying that when he noticed something strange, the street was completely empty. She tried to stay calm, but seeing her pursuer getting closer and closer, she began to run desperately. Se stumbled and fell after the man grabbed her arm. It seemed she had no way left to escape her pursuer. At that moment, Yoon appeared and shoved the man away from his friend. He grabbed Se's hand, telling her to run as fast as she could. The girl asked what he was doing there. and he reminded her that he worked at a nearby restaurant, and he asked who the guy chasing her was if by any chance it was the serial killer. The men continued to chase them as they tried to head for a more crowded place. Attempting to shake him off, June decided to go through an alley as a shortcut to the main street. As soon as they entered the alley, Se seemed even more desperate. It was a dead end. When she turned to tell Yoon, he was coming towards her with an iron bar. Still on the ground, she noticed the other man approaching. He complained that Yoon had run too fast, but the blonde man didn't care. After all, he had managed to lure the girl to that isolated spot. There were no security cameras, making it the perfect place for what he intended to do. Se, still on the ground, asked why June was. The men who had been chasing her said that she and her sister had almost ruined them. The young woman didn't understand. Toher, her sister had been murdered by the serial killer. In reality, they were the culprits, and had merely carved a number into her hand to pretend that number had done it all. The two argued about what they would do with Se, and Yoon made it clear that he would deliver the final blow. Just as his accomplice got closer, they realized they were no longer alone in the alley. The men told the newcomer to get lost and leave them alone. But the real serial killer continued to stare at them. It was as if a blue flame emanated from one of his eyes. It could see numbers floating just above their bodies. Then the man declared that they were destined criminals. A few hours earlier, Se had met with a woman who claimed to be very grateful to Number. She was the witness to the 36th and said that the serial killer had saved both her and her entire family. The victim, in this case, according to the journalist's research, was her ex. But, according to the woman, the guy was a jerk who would go to her house and assault. It was during one of these assaults that the serial killer appeared. Se thinks the whole situation was very dangerous for the witness and her family, and doesn't understand why the woman believes they were safe. The woman just laughs as if there was no chance the serial killer would try to kill her too. In her current situation, the young woman understands who that man saves and who he kills. Facing the men, he says they are both destined criminals, and slowly approaches the two. Yoon's accomplice starts to panic, telling the serial killer to stay away from them. He lunges at him with the iron bar, but is swiftly disarmed and takes a brutal punch to the gut. Knowing he is the next target, Yoon becomes apprehensive as he approaches. The serial killer glances back at the fallen criminal. Since the number floating above his head is 1, he declares that the guy was not his target. It was the same line the witness Se had interviewed earlier told her. On the other hand, the number above Jun's head was 4, pointing at him with an eye. The serial killer states the number and says the blonde man is a target to be eliminated. Then, he lunges at Yoon, who still couldn't believe the predicament he was in. Several seemingly random numbers flash into the criminal's vision. As the two clash with sharp knives, the blonde man is swiftly disarmed and pummeled by his opponent. His accomplice rushes in to help, but also stands no chance against Number. Watching the fight, Se remembers everything she heard about the killer, how there was no pattern in target selection, how he could have fooled the police for so long, and how witnesses always said it was as if he predicted the future. The last woman she interviewed recounted that her ex-boyfriend, who was murdered, had brought a bag when he came to her house. When the police opened the bag, it was full of flammable material. The guy had planned to set his ex's house on fire. Meaning, if the number hadn't appeared that night and dealt with the guy, it would have burned down her house with her entire family inside. Back in the present, June, even on the ground, was pointing a knife at the killer. That makes no difference at all to the man who smashes his target's face into the ground with a powerful kick. Se, still watching, begins to think that this man might be able to see things normal people couldn't. Perhaps he predicted the future, and was able to identify people who would commit murders before they had the chance to commit them, and even see the number of murders those people would commit. The serial killer takes out a recorder, stating the date, time, target number, and his name. He explains that by eliminating this target, he would be saving the lives of 4 people he would have killed. Before finishing the guy off, he still asks if he had any last words or wishes, as he would try to fulfill them within reason. Yoon curses him, scoffing, as if he still hadn't understood that he was very close to his end. Number thus understands that those were the last words he wanted to say. Although Yoon began to beg for his life, it was now too late. With all that transpired, the blonde man's accomplice seizes the chance to flee, dragging himself away. Finally, the killer carves the number 4 into his target's hand. Se questions if the killer won't go after the other guy, but according to him, anyone with only the number 1 was not a target. It would be eliminating one life to save another. The young woman concluded that it wasn't worth it. There would be neither loss nor gain in finishing off someone like that. For her, this line of thinking was starting to make sense. Precisely for this reason, she offers. She had lost count of how many times she imagined being able to identify future killers and stop them before they could do anything. As a reporter, she explains that she could help the criminal hide and spread his message to more people. Having someone like her with the same goal would be invaluable help. The man asks if that was truly what she believed. Showing his face to her, he declares that he won't waste time talking. Then he takes out a new recorder and asks if she had any last words or wishes. Se is incredulous. Why was he saying this to her? In the serial killer's eyes, the number hovering above her head was clear. 12. To him, all human lives had the same value. Even though there were those who were good and those who were bad. What he knew was that the death of certain people could make the world a better place. Even without knowing who was good or bad, he would try to eliminate the numbers he found. In the end, his goal was to save as many lives as he could, and to ensure that he wouldn't hesitate to kill. A Café TV reported that crimes imitating the serial killer were multiplying. The waitress watched the news about the deaths of Sei and Jun, where Joan's accomplice had given details about what happened. A customer calls for the waitress, pulling her focus from the news. While we notice a strange customer in the background, the man was none other than the serial killer, sitting calmly and making notes in a notebook. He carefully chose the items he wanted from the menu, so they would arrive at the time he desired. Even the spot where he sat was no accident. It was perfect for a wide view of who entered and exited the place. Sitting by the window, he also had a view of the street, where he could see the number above the head of everyone who passed by. The first to catch his attention is a girl with a choker and the number 2, and the guy who had just left the government building and had the number 4. The waitress had the number 1 above her head, and the criminal was concluding that his targets were running out, at least in that area. His priority was to go after targets with higher numbers first, especially when they were blinking. The waitress arrives at the table to serve the order, but he is no longer there. There is only money to pay the bill and an untouched coffee on it. In another restaurant, a gang was celebrating, laibly. Their noise bothered the people around them who just wanted to eat in peace. Finally, a waiter asks the customers to make less noise so as not to disturb other people. In response, the guy throws a bottle at the wall, almost hitting 2 young people at a time. Holding another bottle, the guy asked if they were really bothering them, intimidating. At the back of the bar, another tattooed guy calls the waiter to bring more drink. Meanwhile, at the table, the rude guy is congratulated for being released from prison on parole. The blonde man says the lawyers cost a fortune, complaining that it was annoying to have to make a deal with the girl's father. As if he had to accept the money after everything that happened to his daughter. The blonde man felt no guilt at all for having run over the girl after drinking too much and causing her to lose her leg. The guy thought he had every right to live free even after used because he was going to compensate the victim, who only accepted the money because she was threatened by the aggressor's associates. Leaving the bar, the blonde man gets into a car and his colleagues laugh because he's already back to driving, saying it's better to avoid those pig cops. Even drunk, the guy speeds up the car, heading inside. The blonde man is practically asleep at the wheel, and doesn't even realize what he's doing, until from behind him, the serial killer appears, telling the guy to turn the wheel or something worse would happen. At the last moment before, the blonde man obeys, and then he receives other orders to drive to a specific location. At that moment, the blonde man's number begins to flash, indicating it would decay soon. This meant that in less than a day, this guy would kill someone. The serial killer tells him to get into the passenger seat and asks if he has any last wishes. But before it reaches 0, the blonde man tries to prevent the throat slitting. Control of the steering is lost and he skids across the street, losing patience. Number slams the criminal's head against the steering wheel, and then stabs him in the chest. The car stops and the serial killer takes out his recorder, once again logging the date, time, and the number above the criminal's head. The dying blonde man tries to ask who sent the serial killer, who continued his recording, saying that no matter what he did, his target's number wouldn't change. The criminal takes advantage of this moment to try and stab the serial killer. But it was in vain. Only after this does the criminal's number disappear. The next day, he returns to the cafe he was at before, and the waitress from the previous day. On the stairs, he thought he had to make a decision while the girl climbed, carrying several heavy boxes. The killer remembers the number that was above her head the day before. Then she stumbles and begins to fall down the stairs. At that instant, he can see that her number had changed. Before she could tumble down, shaken by the near accident, she thanks him and asks if he is okay. Another and telling the girl to be more careful and asking if the young man is alright. But his mind was too preoccupied, trying to understand what had happened to the girl's number. She seems like just an ordinary girl, and he was sure he had seen the number 1 above her head the day before. So why had the number gone up? He had confirmed countless times that it was immutable. From the bottom of the stairs, the girl apologized once more, and Number realized her name was Hee Hyun Mo. The girl, who had been having headaches earlier, comments that her right eye has been hurting for the past few days. Her colleague thinks it might be due to the dry weather or because she's been sleeping too late lately. Concerned about the girl's eyes, she gives Hee Hyun some eye drops to use until she can see a doctor. The two watch more news on TV about crimes copying the famous number. Upon hearing about an old serial killer, Hyun Sehul Mo, the girl seemed frightened. She makes up an excuse to leave, but she was bothered by the news about this other criminal. Her coworkers comment that the young woman must have another part-time job, even though at her age she should be studying. She needed to get to her next job quickly, and as soon as she arrived, she was slapped across the face for being late. She and her coworker were reprimanded by their boss. No matter how bad it was, Hee-Hyun believed she could handle it. Pain was just temporary. As long as she could work and earn some money, she would endure it. No matter how difficult things were, she faked a smile and tried to move forward, until a customer said her full name as if he knew her, leaving the girl stunned. Images of a school desk graffitied with the word killer flashed in her memories. The customer revealed that she was the daughter of Hyun Seo, the famous serial killer from 12 years ago. The people at the table started laughing at the situation, while the customer continued saying he didn't expect to find her there after she had stopped going to school. Began to see golden numbers above their heads. She ran out of the tent feeling sick. Hira was hurting again, and she felt like something was wrong with her. From atop a building, the serial killer number watched her, remembering what she was wearing when he saw her before, but especially the terrifyingly high number of victims she would claim. That seemed very strange, and he wondered who Hee-Hyun Mo truly was. On the news, Hyun Seo Mo appeared surrounded by reporters asking why he had done everything he did. The police asked the reporters to let them pass, but they wanted more details about everything that had happened. In the living room at home, Hee-Hyun watched these news reports with her mother. Not understanding what had happened, she asked her crying mother why her father asked him to receive money they were owed. At 9 years old, she entered it, horrified by the reality she was living. When she turned 14, other students graffitied her desk and cursed at her, saying she had a killer's blood in her veins. Parents of other students complained to the school principal that she would also become someone terrible in the future. During that same period, Hee-Hyun tried to talk to a friend, but the girl came furiously toward her. Without understanding anything, she was slapped across the face by someone she could trust. In the principal's office, meaning it could have been the work of the serial killer. The men thought that because they were close, Hee-Hyun would know about this incident, but she was too young when all of this, there was no way she could have known everything. Her father had disappeared, and she only saw him again when he was arrested and appeared on TV. The teacher asked her to be more careful with what she said, to put herself in the shoes of the suffering victims. Without considering that things weren't easy for her either. Hee-Hyun began to laugh in disbelief at the situation, questioning if she was the one in the wrong, if it was her fault for befriending a victim's sister, or for having a serial killer father. The man, however, continued saying that she couldn't expect these suffering people to understand her situation. He even started to say that she couldn't be defensive every time she met a victim's family member, but quickly realized what he said was a mistake and apologized. The girl trembled with rage, and the only thing that came to her mind was her father's name, as if it were a curse she couldn't shake off. She was sitting in a park surrounded by people strolling. Hee-Hyun didn't just see people normally, she also saw golden numbers above each of their heads. And she didn't quite understand what was happening. She had learned that if she knew, the numbers would appear, and she would focus on them. At first she was confused by the 2 dots that appeared, thinking it was something related to time, but some of them were too large to represent hours, so that was still an unknown. It could be some kind of strange illness, even if she had no idea what kind. Being here, a young man, Min-bak, appeared, asking how she was, but according to her, a child like him wouldn't understand. And Min wanted to know why. He took advantage of the meeting and gave her hand lotion, which left her confused. Then he reminded her that her birthday was the next day. In fact, he thought that was why Hee-Hyun had called him there. Min reminded her that they had been friends for over a decade and should enjoy the day to celebrate. Until he noticed his friend was crying and asked what had happened, she said she also didn't understand why she had suddenly become so sentimental and thanked him for the gift. Hee-Hyun confessed that those last few days hadn't been easy. She told him about meeting her old schoolmate, which brought all her past back. Although she thought she had moved past those things, it left her nauseous and dizzy. She remembered that back in school, a group of mothers had gone to the principal, arguing that while the girl might not be to blame for having the father she did, living in that reality, she wouldn't become a good person and would choose the easy path. Ever since she heard that, he had emotionally stable, responsible person. She would never follow in her father's footsteps and become a murderer. Min found all of it ridiculous. She shouldn't blame herself. After all, she wasn't a murderer. Jihyun felt that the world they lived in forced her to think that way, and a child like him, so she could prove she had what it took to grow up healthy and happy. She smiled, watching her friend decide whether they should play a board game or an online game. In the end, they decided to enjoy a game at a cafe. They went to karaoke, had ice cream. That was until Hee-Hyun saw the number above Min's head decrease. A immediately noticed she had become strange, but she said it was nothing. Everything was fine. Even so, he felt something was off, besides having the sensation that someone was watching them. Indeed, behind them were men with cameras following them. It seems there's a group spying on them with cameras and tracking them as they move. Mohan Cheol's daughter appears on TV some years later. The gossip reporter claims she is living happily. The video sent to them ended, and even so, they were teenagers getting into trouble. And the gossip reporter said another funny fact was that the video was filmed on November 17th. That is, 2 days prior was the memorial for her father's 13 victims, and now she is the same age as the little. The man said the world is very unfair because, while some don't have their daughters, others have fun and live on after that. Trying to justify himself, he said she isn't wrong for trying to date someone and live, even as the daughter of a serial killer. He just finds it a funny situation and says the lesson of the day is that God doesn't exist. This reporter's YouTube video already has 1 million views, and many people agree with him. And some people are disgusted because she will follow her father's lineage by having children and getting married. Other jerks also say they were classmates of some victims, and therefore feel anger towards the girl. As her friend returns home, he sees some people causing a disturbance. Additionally, the police are scolding a man who was causing a disturbance in the street. Other people in the YouTube comments complain about fake news, saying she might not have the DNA for psychopathy. And some argue that it's biological, and you end up just like your parents. At that moment, the boy enters Ahumajoni's house, his mother. It's been a while since they left. She asks if he adequately hid his face so as not to be seen by the paparazzi. After all, if he's filmed entering there, he'll get into big trouble and people will say they're living together. Hyun is very upset with people because they know nothing about her. She was sure it was those old classmates who followed her and took these, asks her to calm down a bit, and says she doesn't even need to read the idiot's comments. After all, they'll disappear soon when they have no more drama to cause. Hee-hyun feels very betrayed having to hear comments about inheriting crime and karma and never being able to grow up normally. This could really make her go down the wrong path, and as soon as she's living well and healthy, they'll start cursing her precisely for being happy. She wonders what she's working for and what she's trying to prove as she's forced to smile and act as if nothing. At that moment, her mother enters the room because outside, people are throwing stones at their window. Aho Mae apologizes to Bak because of the people outside and the way Hee-Hyun is acting. She knows she should be with her but she's working all night. Her friend says they are in exam period, so she doesn't have to worry as soon as her mother tells him not to leave the house if possible and to call if anything happens. She notices the numbers appearing above his head again. When the numbers start to drop, she gets scared and tries to tell him not to leave the house. Afterward, he starts looking for ingredients in her house and finds nothing to make. He realizes that the people who were throwing stones at her window have left, so he tells his friend that he's going to quickly go down to a convenience store. He notices she's asleep and leaves silently. However, he is caught by surprise by the men who were throwing. They prevent him from closing the door and start to enter, asking if he's her relative or boyfriend. The guys even know his name and start filming by X's face, asking if the girl is home. He tries to say they are crossing the line and that he will call the police for filming and bothering, but it's no use. The guys force the door open and start entering. An extremely strong man slams his hand on the door, preventing Beck from closing it. The deranged man says that many years ago, his daughter was also about 18 years old. She was a cute little girl and was taken to heaven because of Heejun's father. Beck puts the pieces together, understanding that this man wants revenge and is completely unhinged. Entering the house, he starts asking where the girl is and with twisted ideas in his head, he even seems happy to know that the serial killer had a daughter. He says he suffered a lot because of this, but now it's finally his turn and he pulls out a hammer. His friend places a hand on the man's shoulder and tells him to stop, but the guy isn't in a good mood today and immediately strikes back. Someone from the group says he'll get into trouble for using violence. At that moment, the girl wakes up and sees the commotion in her room, and Beck lies like a corpse on the floor, saying he will make her pay for what he suffered in equal measure. The girl notices her friend's countdown reaching 1 minute. Finally, she is seeing things clearly. Every hour, every minute, and every second remaining for her friend. His life ticking away like a clock, with time running out. Finally, she sees that no matter who these people are, they will always treat her as the serial killer's daughter. They just need some revenge, or someone to project their anger onto. Always treating her as someone who might become like her father in the future. Without a second thought, the girl says that if that's what they want her to do, she will do it. grabbing a knife, ready to put the guy in his grave. But at that moment, the numbers criminal appears and stops her. Everyone stares at this madman inside the house in shock, and he asks Mohi Hyun if those are her last words. Without even waiting for the girl to answer, he slashes her with the knife, claiming she was going to be just like her father. All of this appears on the internet because the guy started a live stream. Everyone is in shock, seeing the guy with the hammer seeking revenge, and screaming that it was only fair for him to make the girl pay for the pain he felt. We saw a lot of people watching, the live stream showed everything, right up until she pulled out the knife. But the numbers criminal is smart, and smashed the cell phones to leave no trace. He held the girl, not caring much, the numbers madman took her to meet her father on another plane. It's none of his concern. A merely fulfills his mission. After he finishes the task, the guys stare at him in fear. They start talking about fleeing as fast as they can, because the guy's knife is covered in ketchup. One of them flees, whining because he lost his camera. The guy seeking revenge is in shock to see that the girl took a hit. So he tries to finish her off but he lets the guy leave alive because he only has the number 1 above his head. The girl on the floor asks, who is the guy with the scar? Seeing that she is, he notices that his knife wasn't that sharp. Furthermore, the numbers above her head also haven't disappeared. This makes her understand that he also sees numbers, just like her. Seeing his eyes glow blue, and the guy still sees several numbers above her head. It would be 4,000 lives she would reap in the future, which, the report continues, stating that the only thing in common among the victims were numbers on their skin. They don't know the guy's motive or what the numbers mean, and that same old story we've already heard. At this moment, the girl understands everything as her life flashes before her eyes, and she realizes she would take 4,000 lives from the future, in a way she doesn't know how. She also understands that this guy is here to take the lives of people who are sinister criminals. Her vision begins to blur, and she sees the time she has left before her eyes. She has 30 seconds left, and her friend has 50, which makes her sad because she didn't want Bake to be gone. She doesn't know what, and desperately wants to help her friend somehow. The scarred man asks if she has, as the guy always repeats himself. She uses her remaining energy to ask, even though he attacked Bake. Our favorite anti-hero knows it's a question she would hardly understand. Finding the girl strange, as this is her curiosity when she's about to meet the Pope in heaven. A explains that people with the number 1 are not targets to be eliminated under his strange rule. After all, a person's outcome doesn't change because of that. After this explanation, which he has given thousands of times, the girl understands and closes her eyes. At that moment, as he tightened his grip on the knife, she began to weaken, losing consciousness. Something strange happened then, that utterly terrified the masked man, until it reached the number 1, by which point the girl was almost gone. This makes our anti-hero remember a conversation with a woman, saying that he was the only one who could fall, and that he would do it no matter what. Unless he could prove that the number, otherwise he wouldn't complete his task. But at that moment, the guy seeking revenge appeared behind him with a hammer. But our anti-hero is very powerful and manages to defend against Thor's hammer blow. The guy starts shouting that and at that moment, the number above her head rises to 2. He says his only reason for living is this, and he's ready to eliminate the masked man too. This leaves the mask, as his number increased out of nowhere. Seeing this situation, he finds a way to wrench the hammer from the guy's hand and throws him to the ground. He starts to remember a previous case where the numbers also increased. He decides to leave that for later and will act according to the changes. At that moment, the guy gets up again, trying to finish off the already unconscious girl on the ground. So he does what he does best and sends the guy to meet his maker in style. After this, the police start heading to the location, with 2 bodies on the ground and the other guy almost joining them. The masked man finds it interesting that the number went from 4,000 to 1 out of nowhere, wondering who this girl is and why she was the only one to experience this phenomenon. As the police approach, he says he has made up his mind and already has an idea. He hits the road in his dark and very suspicious car. The girl is inside the car, still half unconscious. Until, feeling a lot of pain, she wakes up and wonders where she is. Getting out of the car, she finds herself in a strange place with a building or a sign. She remembers being home the day before with her friend Beckman. Suddenly, the guy with the scar appears, and she starts to remember what happened the previous night. Our beloved anti-hero saw her waking up sooner than he expected. When she tries to run away in fear of him, remembering what he did, a rope catches her foot, preventing her from running far, and he tells her not to waste energy on it and to go into his house. While doing his tasks, the guy says he has no intention of harming her, but he wants her to stay quiet. The girl obeys and waits inside the car while he does some crazy things. Remembering that this guy kept appearing at the diner where she works, she soon puts the pieces together and knows he is the infamous number criminal, and she understands that his targets are people with numbers above their heads. She remembers him talking about the 4,000 people whose lives he would reap, asking him if she had committed that act. But the guy is annoying and keeps correcting her, stating the exact number of people whose lives she was going to take. Then he explains that people with a number 1 above their heads are not targets to be eliminated. For some strange reason, after answering her question, it's as if she knew exactly what to do to avoid being eliminated by him. Her friend Bakmin is only alive because of her. Originally, the boy was meant to die because of that guy, and he would have ended up being taken along with her because of it. But in some miraculous way, she altered fate, and her number turned into a 1. That man was supposed to survive and create a new future, but the moment his number increased to 2, he became the anti-hero's next target. So at that moment, she understands that if her friend survived, it's because the masked man fulfilled his task. He confirms that he ended that man's life, and before he intervened, she almost died too. Hee-hyun asks, our Punisher asks if she is blaming him, considering she tried to end that guy's life. He then explains that once a number is formed, it should not change for anything, and that's what she didn't understand. It doesn't matter if you get some cuts, or turn into this, or become confined. The number doesn't change for anything, because the numbers are destined to fulfill their count due to fate. But in some magic, she managed to decrease that number. In a sinister way, he asks if she understands what her existence means to him. After all, this has never happened before, and he starts driving somewhere. Hee-hyun asks where she is being taken. Our masked man says he doesn't know yet, and is just driving aimlessly. The guy said he can't let someone like her walk around freely. Even if she refuses, he says but she will constantly be on the run. Besides having to prove her innocence with everyone pointing fingers at her, she can go ahead and fulfill her destiny, even eliminating someone as everyone expects of her. When he asks what her decision will be, the girl freaks out and tries not to listen to him. Putting it in her head that she has to escape no matter what, she asks him to drop her off at her house. She says she'll even stay with him, but she needs a few things and needs to see her mother. Starting to get very scared, she says she needs to get her clothes and other belongings. Hee-hyun thinks this won't work, but he accepts the proposal. So he takes her to her house, and the girl tries to sneak in, trying to go unnoticed. Hee-hyun imagines telling her to be back in 30 minutos without being caught by anyone. At that moment, the girl enters her house jumping over the crime scene tape, grabbing emergency items, clothes, and other things, hurrying a lot, and thinking of a way to stay away from that man. Thinking of going in the opposite direction, and then escaping. However, someone watches her through the doors opening in a sinister way. The number criminal says that if she returns, she will pass the test. But if she tries to escape him, things won't go well for her, and she will fail. And at that very moment, someone emerges, lurking, a shattered bottle gripped in their hand. At that moment, the person bursts into her house, making the girl scared senseless. As he raises, the girl screams in despair, and suddenly she realizes it's her friend Bakmin. He is surprised to see Hee-hyun alive, and then he asks what he is doing in her house. He says he heard the police left and came back to get a backpack he left behind. And someone inside the house picked up that broken glass bottle. He thought those crazy people have returned and apologizes for scaring her. The girl puts her hand on his face, noticing it's bandaged, saying it's her fault, which leaves the boy a bit embarrassed and red, asking if he's okay or if he's in pain, and Beck says it was just a scratch. Changing the subject, her friend asks where she's been these past few days she was missing, commenting that he's very happy to see her alive after her disappearance. All the media and people are spreading rumors saying she fled the crime scene because she was an accomplice of the number criminal. Also, a detective gave him a card earlier, to call if he knew anything and to tell everything he knew about the events. Notice, Bakmin asks why she has all this luggage. The girl doesn't answer, simply walking towards the door. Bak asks what's happening and where Hee-hyun is going, in total despair. He asks what he's trying to do. After all, he saw everything that, during his time in the hospital, he watched the video to be sure, seeing that moment when the guy hit him with a hammer and the other told him not to use violence, the man saying she would pay for what he suffered and all that. However, in the scene where the girl was about to attack, the live stream ended. He asked the detective what happened next and the man picked up his saying that the phone was destroyed and the live stream ended at that moment. According to netizens, it seems it was the work of the numbers criminal. They don't know if Hee-hyun is alive, and if she is, they don't know her whereabouts, and many things still need to be clarified. Anyway, After the video stopped, the public is pointing fingers at the girl and blaming her. Because he's her friend, the detective asks him to convince her. After all, they also don't have information about the numbers guy yet. On a street lit only by a lamppost, the girl says she's leaving before the police arrive. Blackman asks why she's running and asks her to answer if she eliminated that man. He imagines she didn't do it. So why is she running if she didn't do that? If she decided not to stay with him, she would be pursued all the time and would have to prove her innocence to people. However, he says she doesn't need to prove any. After all, he knows she didn't inherit her father's traits. She should let them say what they want, and he says she shouldn't care what others think. After all, deep down he's sure she wouldn't do something like that. But the girl shouts no and that he's wrong because it's not about proving something. It's not that simple, because at that moment she didn't want to stop the man or save back from him. She simply wanted to put him 6 feet under and wipe him out. She wasn't out of her mind either. She was thinking clearly and didn't want to save anyone. She imagines that what they say about her, that's why the masked man can see the numbers above her and others. And if it wasn't because of him, maybe it's for another reason. Then she apologizes for being his best friend and starts to leave. Bak stands there, completely sad, tells her to come back. But that's what you get for liking a problematic girl. Jihyun says she doesn't want him to get hurt because of her and he shouldn't waste his life for someone like her. Her best friend says his mother is in the hospital after collapsing and he can't break her heart again. This hits the girl hard as she remembers her mother's reaction when she got the news about her father. Crying, she said it would be another reason for her to be like her father, and even so she said she wants to see her mother one last time. But after that she leaves and gets into our anti-hero's car, who says she's late and he thought she had run away. The girl calls him master and says he can get rid of Pat. While she's with him, she shouldn't worry about ending anyone's life. The man with the scar says she doesn't need to worry because if he sees the number increasing above her head he'll get rid of her right away. As they hit the road, the girl remains thoughtful and relaxed in the presence of this lunatic with good intentions. Meanwhile, that weird yo-yo they conclude that the girl is alive and wonder why she's sneaking around her own house like this. The detective expects to have an answer about the camera surveillance system soon. He picks up photos of the girl at the diner and also sees numbers above her head, revealing his red eyes, just like the numbers blue eyes and G's yellow ones. Someone in a dark hallway starts calling emergency services, stating their address and detailing the incident, whispering and saying there's a person behind their door, asking for help as quickly as possible. The police officer said they would send a patrol to her address. The girl keeps asking non-stop why they don't just arrest this maniac at her door. Police tell her to come down and say the guy is probably just loitering in the hallway and might not even hurt her. And for now, they can't do anything. They can't arrest a guy based on her suspicion. In desperation, the woman asks if they're going to wait for her to be alive. We see the two of them on the road 9 hours later. They two stop for a bit to eat and relax by the roadside, as she asks if he eats anything besides cereal. Ignoring her, the anti-hero asks her to check a drawer, but the girl keeps pestering him, asking about the foods making the guy say he eats eggs and chicken too, but doesn't really like the taste, saying that the truly important thing is the routine, which must always be repeated. What bothers him most is when variables interrupt his routine. Today is November 20, marking the 4th day since she started her journey with the serial killer, Number, even though she says she's with him and isn't actually doing anything, just accompanying him. As he gets out of the car, Number tells her not to loiter on the street because the police know her face. He says that if he doesn't return in an hour, she can go her own way. The girl comments that his routine is always the same. He stops in a dark alley, then goes to a somewhat empty place and starts looking for his next target in the crowd. Hyun remembers he used to do this at the restaurant, making her wonder if she's following the right path. And furthermore, what path is she even following? At night, the guy appears, startling the girl, changing his clothes, which are stained with tomato sauce, making the girl a bit disgusted. Number says he put 2 people to sleep. Both were going to have a party, one of them with 5 people and the other with 3. He had to put them in their coffins today, even though he didn't want to use force. Suddenly the girl starts to feel a headache and then she understands what these yellow numbers mean. They are the remaining time of a person's life. Kinder asks her about what she's seeing in her vision. Mohi Hyun tries to play dumb and pretends she doesn't know what he's talking about. In fact, she has no reason to hide anything from him, but she got scared. Meanwhile, the guy gets lost in thought, remembering the past, where he used to complain about something strange happening with his eyes during childhood, realizing that the same thing is happening to the girl, just as he thought. A day passes and he parks the car again in a secluded alley, saying he has some things to buy and will be back in an hour or two. At this moment, the girl's eye activates and she starts seeing people's remaining lifespans. There are two numbers and the number on the right decreases at a different rate each time. The units are different, so 1 and 5 before someone dies means 1 minute and 5 seconds. The 3 and 31 that appeared earlier on back mean was 3 hours and 31 minutos. If extended a bit further, a 3 and 2 from before represented 3 days and 2 hours. Extending even further, in this case, she tries to decipher the numbers above the heads of the family in front of her, noticing that the woman named Yuni looks very ill. The girl gets annoyed because she thinks Yuni isn't eating properly while living alone. Indeed, the woman connecting this with the beginning, which shows she is the girl who was being pursued, where the guy behind her door kept banging and telling her to report him to the police. Telling her to do it and he would come in and finish her off. He kept telling her to see what would happen if she messed with him. The guy started threatening her entire family with a truly Joker-esque mindset. Then she sees that this entire family has 8 and 31 above, as if the guy who threatened her during the night would get what he wanted. In the middle of the crowd, there is this hooded man walking to fulfill his promise. But it won't be that simple, as our anti-hero notices him, noticing the number 3 above his head and saying he finally found him. Noticing the family's number is the same, the girl she tries to understand what is happening, and noticing the speed at which the numbers on the right are decreasing, they are not seconds. These will happen in 8 hours. The little girl keeps telling her mom to go to the mall, while Hee-Hyun wonders what to do. Even if she follows them, she won't have much to do to help. She gets out of the car and starts going after the family. From the top of the building, the serial killer notices Mo Hee-Hyun running and but then he realizes she is chasing someone. Connecting the dots, he realizes she is running after the family being pursued by the other guy. Meanwhile, he continues to watch the man with the number 3 above his head and finally finds him. Unye, the mother, starts receiving several messages and blocks. The man says she should report the stalker who keeps calling her to the police. She realizes the maniac put her number in public places for people to message. They started making reservations and even putting her name in funeral homes, forcing her to block all of it. The old man needs to understand what this looks. However, the woman does not know what to do, which is why she is sitting there doing nothing. Nevertheless, she will stay there until she can move. But she wants to prevent the little girl from knowing about it. Mo Hee-Hyun understands that she is being pursued by a stalker, which means her entire family will be targeted by this crazy person as well. Hee-Hyun does not think this is fair, because the child is still very young. At this moment, the serial killer appears like a ninja, saying there are 3 targets, including a child. The girl is startled by his, and the anti-hero asks what number she is seeing above their heads. There is no reason to hide it, as she also sees number, which is why she blindly followed the family there. The girl asks how he knows this. And the man with the number explains it was the pain she felt in her eye earlier. Besides, she kept staring at the top of his head sometimes. He said it was strange from the beginning, because even with the concept of doors to the afterlife, Hee-Hyun accepted the absurdity of the numbers too easily. She wonders if she should tell him the whole truth, as at this point there is no longer any reason to hide it. Meanwhile, the mother talks with her daughter means. After that, they decide to go their way and leave them all. Mohi thinks about asking, but realizes it will draw attention and stops. Then she starts telling the truth to the serial killer with the number, who finds it interesting that she can see the remaining time for people, even though she is not entirely sure. She thinks this family will be gone in 8 hours and 31 minutos, and at that point, this entire family will be on the other side by around 10 de la noche. She also overheard a conversation about a stalker who keeps bothering the woman. It could be the stalker's doing, and the man with the number thinks it is definitely him. When the girl asks how he is so sure, the anti-hero says the guy is watching them from above. Besides having the number 3 on, which should not be a coincidence, as it is the exact number of people in the family. When the girl thinks about running after them, the serial killer holds her back from doing it. The girl thinks she should go there and tell the whole family. She thinks she needs to tell them about the stalker being on the upper floor of the mall so they can report him to the police. Even after all the warnings, the man with the number gets angry because the girl still does not understand. But at that moment, someone bumps into Yuni and knocks her shopping bags to the floor. The family's mother thanks the people who help, but suddenly she sees something that makes her freak out and scream. Her family tries to understand what's wrong with her while she's hysterical, until she starts pointing at the stalker watching from upstairs, crying and wondering what he's doing in the same mall as her. The number guy says she got what she wanted because the family already noticed he was there. At that moment, Mohi realizes the numbers above their heads have changed, turning to 7 hours and 4 minutes, and she remembers the number set. Numbers can never be changed, no matter what they do. Their fate of being eliminated by the man in 7 hours doesn't change, unless the number serial killer interferes and wipes out the lunatic. The guy says her ability to see when someone is going to kick the bucket is very advantageous. After all, if the clock stops, it means these people's lifespan doesn't change, so there's no reason to rush so much since they know he only has 7 hours. Meanwhile, he will be prepared as always and asks Moji Hyun to continue following the three. Always trying to be as discreet as possible or the stalker will notice and become cautious. Next, she asks how they will stay in contact if he removed her phone's chip. The serial killer says he placed a tracker on her phone earlier and will know her location. The girl is shocked and asks if he's serious, saying it was very bizarre. He always warned her that she was free to run, but never said he would let her go completely. And yet, she continues to stay by his side of her own free will, saying he never forced her to help with this at any point. Hyun then realizes she ended up helping the number serial killer commit his crimes. He says if she doesn't want to do it, she can tell, as he prefers to do it alone rather than have her as an obstacle. The girl finds it hard to believe that this will only stop when that stalker is gone. She asks how her number remains unchanged even after everything that has happened. The stalker couldn't do anything if she locked the door and reported him to the police. First of all, the police can only take action after something happens, instead of taking precautions and remedying before the act actually happens. Secondly, he can feel a bit of devotion coming from the stalker, as if he had meticulously planned this whole scheme for a long time. So simply locking the house door wouldn't be enough to stop this madman. Time passes, with only 1 hour and 15 minutos remaining for that family. At that moment, the father complains to the police for leaving so early. They say if the stalker shows his face, then they can take measures and put an electronic ankle monitor on him. But since he hasn't appeared since they saw him at the mall, there is nothing to worry about for now. The police ask them to continue wearing the watch they gave them. And also to try to stay inside the house as much as possible. They say they will do one more round before leaving and will notify them if they find anything. As the police leave, we see someone observing from behind a grate. But it's not the stalker, it's actually Moji Hyun. The girl is relieved that the police have finally left. Seeing that this place is below the construction and is happy it's empty. As she remembers the number guy said if she had doubts, she could see for herself. Since she's on the highest floor, the crime won't happen. That is, if she stays on guard in front of the door, of course. She didn't feel good about having to take someone's life, but just as the anti-hero said, it's necessary for this person to be gone to save Tres or innocence. Even if she can't do it herself, she has to help the number guy somehow. With 39 minutes left until the incident, the stalker appears at the family's building, walking with a toolbox in his hand until he stops in front of the door next to the house. Pulling out adhesive tape and sticking it on the outside of the door. While the girl wonders what he's doing, he covers the grates, and then using a tool to break the glass without making much noise. Thus invading a floor of the building, walking cautiously there without making a sound. And the girl realizes he's gone, and now with only 26 minutes left until the end, the woman starts to smell something strange inside the apartment, like a gas leak. She finds it strange because she doesn't remember leaving the gas on in the kitchen. At this moment, Moji creeps in silently while the father asks if they left the window open. And she realizes it was the window he broke letting the gas in. As she goes to the spot, she realizes he left a gas cylinder connected to the apartment to make everything explode. However, he didn't actually leave, and ends up entering through another. While the girl tries to disconnect the gas hose, she hears screams. She then quickly removes the hose from the apartment. The girl starts screaming desperately for someone to open a door. At this moment, the mother hears and becomes even more frightened. After all, her father was struck by the crazy guy, and completely deranged. The guy starts taking the daughter hostage too. Laughing and saying it's been a while since they last saw each other. Asking how she dared to run away when he begged for mercy. Saying he warned her he would wipe out all of them there. Shouting and saying that if she keeps treating him like trash, things will get bad for her. Amidst these family issues and all this madness, something happens that makes everyone stop. The guy was about to hit the woman, and he stops because of a noise coming from above. Which comes from Moji, her phone vibrating, and a message from the number serial killer telling her to report to the police. Seeing that it's a message from a phone without a SIM card, she understands who it's from. That this was what the number serial killer was talking about earlier. Taking advantage of the stalker's distraction, the mother throws herself onto him, managing to knock him to the ground and save her daughter's life. The girl runs out to call the police. At this moment, the girl opens the door, and Moji Hyun was and gets hit in the face by the door. Then the stalker viciously pulls the mother by her hair. Hyun watches all of this, somewhat shocked. As the guy pulls out a weapon that's definitely not for cutting chicken. At that moment, the heroine appears, spraying gas in the lunatic's face. Everyone there starts coughing, and he can't do anything either. Seeing that the timer above the woman's head had decreased further, she tells her mother to run. After all, only 12 minutes and 47 seconds remain for. The stalker wasn't expecting another person at his private party and gets irritated. Yelling at the guy and asking why he's going so far. At that moment, the lunatic realizes she must be the one who's been stalking him. asking what he's going to do, and if he's going to report him to the police too. At this moment, it becomes clear that he is the ex-boyfriend of the woman in this family. Even saying that what's about to happen would make a good news story. That's why he told them to go ahead, because he doesn't care after all. No one will stop what he's about to do. By the time the police arrive, they'll all be dead anyway. The moment he runs towards the daughter, Mohita-jan manages to push him, making her wonder how many more people will suffer at the hands of bad people like him and her father. This way, she manages to help the family's daughter escape while she stays behind. The crazy stalker starts yelling for the girl to come back, but what he isn't expecting is that Batman is right behind him. Or rather, our number anti-hero appears to give him a little scare and then vanishes. Used like Batman, the guy keeps scaring him by hiding in the shadows, until the hallway light turns on again after having been turned off. Before he could think it was all in his head, the serial killer appears, grabbing the maniac and slamming him against the wall. Then taking his knife and brandishing it as if the guy were a cut of meat for a barbecue. Telling him to answer his question as soon as the pain subsides, asking the stalker if he has any last word. But the guy doesn't care and grabs his weapon again to try and take out the number. But the anti-hero doesn't get tired of cosplaying as Batman and disappears again, which makes this stalker increasingly paranoid. He then starts running towards the mother, his ex-girlfriend. Before he could even get close to her, he's slammed with a kick to the back by the number, leaving Mohi startled, and then the number hurls the gas cylinder at him, saying he wouldn't be hurt if he had behaved from the start. Meanwhile, the lunatic lies on the ground agonizing, making him wonder who these people are. He gets up with the gas cylinder in his hand and charges at the girl protected by the number. Before she's hit, a flash goes through her mind where she says she never wanted to be like her father. And perhaps that was the only reason she followed the number's serial killer. She could have easily gotten rid of the phone with the tracker and escaped. She wonders if she was unable to escape out of fear that the number would come after her or not. Or perhaps she was waiting for an answer from this man that only he could give. And it's at that moment that the number saved her from being hit. The moment he wiped out the man, she understood. She wanted a reason to commit crimes with his twisted logic of eliminating people to save others. It's at that moment that the number removes his mask and asks his usual question one last time. She wonders if she truly hoped to change the future with this twisted logic. Because perhaps she truly hoped for a world where her loved ones wouldn't suffer. Because of bad people like that man who pursued them. At that moment, the favorite anti-hero with a superhero complex asks if the guy has any last words. The woman tries to recover upstairs, but she's crying a lot. Mochi asks if she can stand up and helps her. As soon as she stands up and leans on the girl, she asks who they are. Hyun takes the woman and tells her that once the police arrive, they won't mention seeing her there, even if it's not that simple. Also, don't tell the police what this seems. The family woman seems to understand something about these people who say. After a while, she returns home and sees her father on the couch, all battered. While her father complains of pain, Hyun watches the scene, somewhat annoyed by, and the man with the scar says his wounds aren't critical and he'll survive if treated. But of course that can happen because he dealt with the numbers, thus defeating the pursuer who is on the ground, agonizing, almost slipping away. The girl notices he's alive and says that if it weren't for her interruption, he would have completed his plan. He asks if she has any idea who she just messed with. He says she's a terrible kind of girl, and she asks what kind that would be, even though she isn't curious. After all, she doesn't care who he is or what his story is. However, she doesn't care about the opinion of a maniac who even tries to attack a child. Al battered on the ground, the guy curses and says she knows nothing about his life. Meanwhile, Mo tells the serial killer that the police should arrive soon and they need to get out. He tells him to go ahead while he listens to the stalker's last words. Even though it's true he doesn't have much time, he thinks he can do it. She asks if he's serious when he keeps asking these bad people for their last word. The mystery man says there would be no reason to ask every time if it weren't serious. Hyeon asks why he bothers to listen to the words of bad people like that. Then he tells her to go outside if she doesn't want to listen, and she obeys. She stands on top of the building and sees police cars approaching the building, arriving very quickly, and she doesn't understand why he's obsessed with the final words of bad people like that, when they should actually be fleeing from the police at these moments. She returns to warn him about the police and arrives just as he sends the guy to hell. Seeing some ropes and a belt on the ground that she doesn't quite understand, the number serial killer says he left them there in advance, based on the area's layout for when they finished their work. They could be caught by the police, or their faces would appear on cameras. That's why he's suggesting they jump from that height using ropes, just like Batman. She understands this is the escape route he created, but she didn't want to have to do it either. Then he ties the rope to the pipe, puts it on his back, and Hyeon holds on tight not to fall. The girl is in a complete panic, but it's their only option to escape. They continue rappelling down because the guy is a big fan of Batman, and he does everything very meticulously so the security cameras don't catch them. Waiting for the exact moment moths pass in front of the camera, he descends with full force, releasing his foot, letting his body slide down the rope, moving at high speed, leaving the girl completely terrified. He holds onto the rope and pushes his feet against the wall to gain more momentum. This way they start descending the entire building from the outside without being caught. After that, the case is reported with all the street and time information. The police comment that it's a stalker case. The scene was initially discovered by an officer and his superintendent, based on the wounds and the number carved into the victim's wrist. This case was connected to the number serial killer. The next morning, several police cars are already at the scene to investigate the crime scene. Weiss, the detective who also has an ocular ability, and his partner. Knowing there was another case by the same number, criminal, the detective watches the security cameras. His assistant calls his attention and asks what he's doing. Sunday says he's looking at the clouds, trying to guess their shapes. She brings the security camera footage from near that area, explaining that they couldn't handle all the footage. Then he asks her to hide his yo-yo because the boss will get angry if he sees it. And she tells him he should get rid of it soon. Meanwhile, the police and forensic scientists analyze the crime scene. They say they couldn't find any clues this time because the fire extinguisher wiped away the fingerprints. They have nothing but prints of the family victims and the already departed pursuer. Sunbei gently asks Detective Moon if he can tell him where the family victims are now. Moon says the father is in the hospital and the family must be with him too. Then he shares the address with the red-eyed detective. The detective says Sunbei can't enter crime scenes whenever he wants because they are all giving their all. Furthermore, he must take responsibility and not contaminate evidence with dirty shoes. The red-eyed detective says he came at the wrong time and interrupted their hard work. He leaves with his assistant to check the security camera footage. As he leaves, he ironically tells everyone to have a great day at work. The other detectives say they don't need to be so angry at someone who only comes to get in their way. While another detective thinks he's actually a decent guy, annoying his partner. Sunbei's partner says they seem to hate him and the detective understands why. He just wanted to make friends, but they didn't give him a chance. At that moment, he activates his red-eyed ocular ability and analyzes the video. His partner asks if they should go to the hospital and he says not yet. She asks if he minds if she takes a look and takes the footage from his hand. Seeing a hooded man who looks familiar to her, even though she hasn't seen his face yet. She concludes that it's clearly the number criminal entering the building at 10 o'clock at night. The problem is there was no sign of him leaving the building from the security cameras she provided. Asking if she can guess how they escaped, his assistant suggests it must have been through the roof. However, there's also a possibility he escaped through the lower floor. This is if they consider the resident witnesses and the security camera blind spots. However, when they reach the roof and see marks on the pipes, they conclude that's exactly where it happened. He doesn't understand how he wasn't seen by the fourth floor security cameras if he descended that way. Deciding then to take another look at the video of that moment. Noticing that in the footage, some insects got in the way at that moment. At the exact moment of the escape, moths flew in front of the camera. Sunbei notes the camera's range and their blind spots and where the witnesses were looking at that exact moment when a flash of light appeared out of nowhere as soon as the power came back on. The exact moment the swarm of moths agitated by the light blocked the camera for many seconds. All these factors were put together now. But there's no way to know all this unless you're the one committing the crime. This makes him certain that this man always finds a way to get away. Always taking the safest and most efficient route that no one would imagine. Or perhaps he can predict the future to do so. His partner asks if his ocular ability is similar to Detective Sunbei's. During the night, we see the family at the hospital, and the detective calls the girl who survived to talk, telling her to relax because he just wants to ask a few questions. With his ocular ability active, he sees the numbers 2, 3, 1, 0. Asking how she's feeling, the woman says she's fine and has been better. At that moment, the last number, which was 3, turns into 2 above her head. A knows she is aware that she cannot lie now and must answer everything honestly. The girl agrees to this as we see the detective's evidence notebook with a photo. On average, how many lies can a human tell in a day? He thinks it's about 2 or 3 times a day. However, depending on their profession, he says these people can lie up to 200 times a day. Anyway, whether by habit or not, sometimes it's a way to get out of sudden situations. Even if it's out of simple malice and toxic wickedness. The reason for the nature of liars varies greatly, and a statistic can have very little meaning. To be able to see through someone's lies. Being able to see the future estimate of the number of lies a person will tell. It's at these times that you can peek into someone's essence, the man's physique. He's probably 1 meter 80 tall, and if that's the height of the man she saw. The woman answers yes, and the detective assumes she didn't see the man's face. She says she didn't see him after all, it was dark, and she can't remember very well. Seeing that the number didn't go down, he realizes she didn't lie at that moment. Then he asks if, at that time, the man had already subdued the stalker. And asks if she knows what time that happened. The woman imagines it wasn't long after the light went out. So the detective concludes it was about 3 or 5 minutes later, and the woman confirms. confirming that the criminal entered the apartment when the power went out at 10 at night. Also, if they changed their assumption that he fled after looking into the future, when the moths had already covered the security cameras, that would be the moment the man left the apartment. So, as he's talking to the woman, he says the man left the apartment 30 minutos later, given that after entering within 5 minutos he had already subdued the stalker, asking her what he did during the 15 minutos of unaccounted time. The woman says she's not sure because she only briefly ran to him and was in the hallway the whole time.
At that moment, another number goes down, revealing that she told a lie. As soon as she got home, he was already gone and had disappeared, but Sunbae is sure she lied. He knows she lied when she said she ran to him and talked to him, but in reality, she was in her house the whole time with the criminal. He knows she just doesn't want the police to know this and must find out why. Next, he returns to the subject of her being a victim of a stalker, commenting on the portable rope ladder in the gas canister, which showed he was well prepared for the situation. A little apprehensive about the stalker issue, the woman asked what it had to do with the case. The detective is just trying to figure out the criteria the number maniac uses to stalk his victims. Asking Yoon Se-in why she became a victim of this stalker. She can tell him as long as she has a rough idea about it. The girl says she doesn't want to say because it's too stressful. With steady eye contact, he realizes she simply rejected the question, and he can't judge it as a lie. He knows he could try to dig deeper, but he'll face a lot of resistance from her. That's why he decides to ask just one last question. If she knows the girl in the photo who works at a diner. She immediately remembers the woman saying that when the police arrived, she should pretend she hadn't seen her there. However, while talking to the detective, she reveals that she did see the woman before. But it was on the news, and she knows she's the daughter of that psychopath, Mo Hyun Cheol. She manages to bypass the detective's lie detector, which doesn't fall for it because she only omitted a fact. The detective said she was right, but he was sure the girl's face was blurred in the news. Yoon Se-in tries to justify herself, saying she saw the report recently and asks Sunbae to stop doubting her. Saying that a victim like her would have no reason to lie, and his eyes even sparkle. The detective remembers seeing the security cameras and noticed the psychopath's daughter on the building stairs. He says many people almost died, and the only thing they had in common was that they all survived thanks to the number. Subconsciously wanting to return the favor he did. Or perhaps it's to hide something from themselves. That's why he's going to ask the woman one more time, not from the news or reports, but on the day of the incident, if she saw the girl. After this interrogation, we see inside the Daejeong police station, where Sunbae draws conclusions about the Sunlight apartment case and the number serial killer. The chief asks how many times he's been in this cat and mouse game that only wastes his time. Another person comments that in Min Don's case, there was a chance the girl had joined forces with the number criminal. He remembers when the woman lied during the interrogation about not having seen the girl with the men. Smiling and saying that the man isn't lying. Even without evidence that Mo.G.Deon joined forces with him, he understands why. Even with no fingerprints or DNA found, and no identifications on the security cameras, the detective even deleted the image files from the building's security cameras. Not even the victim from Yoon Se-in's family mentioned anything about G being there. Even though he said that if she told the police exactly what happened, she wouldn't have problems. Even while continuing to pursue the girl after the Min Don case, he decides to handle this arrest first. And then investigate the number case separately. With his partner in the car leaving the station, she asks if this is the right thing to do. Sunbae doesn't think there's anything wrong with it because he met the woman on his own and got good answers. After all, hiding the girl is a safety net since the number can predict the future. He thinks it's unlikely they'll be able to follow the trail because of the boy. After all, they haven't been able to have an open conversation yet, and he thinks they can't let him be caught by the police officers first. They should take care of some problems first and then follow them. Amidst all this, we see the girl entering the hospital room to see her father, while the younger one asks what the detective said and if it was really the number. She adds that he also said he doesn't know how they almost came close to death. Something still grips the little girl's heart because the pursuer had no reason to do it. The older one didn't know who he was and the younger one wants to understand why he talked about begging for mercy. They also tell their father that the whole family was almost gone and no one knows why the guy did that. Yoon Se-in tells the younger one that things are over. That everything will be fine from now on, that they don't need to know these things and that their father did nothing wrong and that they are alive. They start crying and hugging each other, thinking that they are well after all this and that they should never think about scary things again after this. The pursuer became another one of the many victims that number made and he recorded their last words. We see an unhappy memory of the number's criminal in a room full of injured people. Besides him, with a scar on his eye and his school friends injured. Screaming at a woman who was doing all this, snatching the lives of all his friends. The woman said she did it because he wouldn't be able to do it on his own. Saying that if he didn't like it he should finish her and number was her master. After that, she claimed another life and the memory comes to an end. Number wakes up inside his car with a headache, remembering that dramatic day. While the girl sleeps in the back seat, he wonders why he remembered such an old memory. Seeing that he left many things behind, he still decides to continue his missions. While the girl wakes up, he continues driving his black van, parking in another alley and going to complete his tasks. Talking to a fully tattooed woman who recognizes him from a while ago. Saying that it's been a long time since he visited her, ever since he became famous. Handing the audio recorders to her, after all she asked for. Then the tattooed woman hands over the contact the man asked for. She asks if she should deduct the cost of all this. Then the girl remembers that these are the recorders he used to carry around. The woman also recognizes the girl, saying that she has nothing to do with her father, and that it's interesting because she was the only one number spared so far. He asks her to ignore everything the woman is saying and leave. After that they hit the road again and she asked what those recorders were. Even with him saying it's none of her business, Moji knows they are the recorded last words of the people he eliminates. Asking who and why he is delivering these recordings to. He says these recordings are the messages from those who are gone. For those who would like to speak one last time. In the end he again leaves a message of their last words for the people they loved. Others instruct their lawyers on how to divide their legacy and inheritance. And then there are those who spend their last breath cursing those who failed to end their lives. She asks why these memos exist. He explains that sometimes they are the only evidence left behind. The information from the eliminated once gathered connects to the intended recipient of the message, as well as the useful parts of the will, and delivers them to the agent who will deliver the recording without a trace. The girl finds it risky as these are recordings from a crime scene. However, the man says that anything that could alert the police has been removed. But the girl doesn't understand why he does this. After all, he's trying to eliminate potential future criminals. But then he goes and delivers their last words to someone, asking why as the same thing happened last time. They were almost caught by the police. All just to pass on the words of a bad person at the end of their life. From her point of view, he's doing nothing but risking his own skin. Even though the girl doesn't understand, he tries to show her something. Placing blue flowers on a grave. She asks whose they are and he says he doesn't know. After all, that man's last wish was to place flowers on his sister's grave. He said the point of it is because he once had a reason which doesn't matter much now. He simply decided to carry out the final wishes of the people he eliminates. It doesn't matter who they are as long as it's within his power to fulfill these last wishes. Moji Dian asks if that even applies to cold-blooded criminals. For the criminal with the number and the scar on his face. Right or wrong, good or bad, doesn't matter, as long as they are one of the future criminals he's sending to their grave. He wants to honor their last wishes. That's what he decided and he's been following it ever since. Even though the girl finds it ridiculous, taking a person's life to save the innocent was what she thought he was doing all this time. But now she doesn't understand if this man cares about the type of person he's about to eliminate. It seems he's a machine only moving in the way he programmed himself. She wonders if something happened in his past, but she can't help. She can only wonder what makes a cold-blooded guy like him keep doing what he does. Finally he reaches his destination and gets out of the car, stopping on a very busy street, a kind of underworld, a very strange place. Our anti-hero says it's the last wish that was on the list of one of the people he took. Saying he's there to carry out a revenge that a man couldn't finish. A man who, in the photograph, has the number 34 above his head. Being a tattooed man inside a nightclub. Observing everyone there, a man facing the masked figure. Desperately asking him to end someone's life. Our anti-hero asks who he should eliminate. We see a tattooed guy at another man's house, telling this man in a suit that he should have had a better life. Then the man in the suit kept insisting that Batman do it. Crying profusely. It was at that moment that he handed over the recordings he received. And in return, the photo and information of the tattooed man. This tattooed man is going to cause a little trouble. Just like the 34 people. That's why he went to this nightclub looking for the guy, as it's the last wish of one of the people on the list. At the nightclub, the tattooed man asks a butler for another bottle of liquor. While talking to someone, he says he's already rested many times during the week. This man says he'll charge 7,000 per head and there are 3 people. He was threatened with losing his family if he didn't follow the conditions. And that's going to happen now. The tattooed man says he takes no pleasure in doing this to civilians. Another man asks if what he's feeling is guilt. The tattooed man says it's a nuisance and things won't calm down for a while. Another problem is that he'll have to do this with his bare hands and can't make it look like an accident. He concludes by saying he'll do it within 6 days. Outside the nightclub, our anti-heroes see him passing by. On the phone, he asks for the whereabouts of the 3 people he needs to send someone to. Moji Dian asks if he's the target, and the masked man says yes. Our protagonist remembered it being 34 in the photo, and now it's 33. He says he can only see numbers in photos at the moment they were taken, and that number can change. If the tattooed man's number were 1 or 0, he wouldn't fulfill that man's last wish. Strangely, he seems to notice the girl observing him, and Ji immediately ducks down in fear. It was a close call for that Yakuza-faced man to see her. He says that now that they've confirmed his number, they can go down from there. Then the girl asks if ending this man's life was someone else's last wish, asking if he sought revenge and his fate was then sealed by the number. And wouldn't it have been better to let him go and carry out his own revenge himself? If he had carried out his revenge, 33 people would have been removed from the list of those destined to die. However, he doesn't know if he would have gone after this guy for revenge. He could have done it to someone else. Because they weren't sure, they should have confirmed it before ending another person's life. Just like last time, they can find out who and how crimes will be committed using the numbers. However, the masked man thinks that no longer makes sense at this moment. Leaving a target alone, he begins to recall past memories, where all his childhood friends were taken by a woman who also saw numbers. That this person planning to end a life might be bad regardless, or not. But the woman said it was different because the people she did that to were destined to become criminals. In the past, the boy asked her how she could be so sure if she couldn't even see the numbers. No matter how many people they attack or if they do it, what matters is that they are still people. That's all these children know. However, he keeps asking her how she can be so sure of what she's doing by taking these lives. Asking Ji if she can see the difference between which number should be left to die and which should be saved. He's asking if she truly knows how to tell which lives have importance and which are worthless. Which of them should be spared and who is good and who is bad just by looking at the numbers. Saying that this is impossible to define, he tells the girl she knows nothing. But innocently, she asks if it's really that hard to tell. She thinks it might be obvious how a hitman would never make a positive difference in the world. When she was a child, adults were always smoking on neighborhood streets as she grew up. She didn't know what they were smoking or how bad it was, but the smell was always unpleasant to her. She believes that separating bad people this way doesn't have to be so complicated. However, the math-loving serial killer thinks she still hasn't understood the point. He decides to stay calm because she's just an uninformed child. He doesn't need to put in much effort trying to convince her of his motives. Whatever the case, he just wants a yes or no answer. When she said it's obvious to choose between the life of one man and the 33 people who would be his victims. He asks if she would choose to end his life to save those other victims. Without hesitation, Moji Hyun replies that she would, and the mysterious emo guy finds this answer sufficient. He needs her to do something for him that is currently beyond her reach. That's why he's going to teach her how to awaken her sharing eyes to the next level. He finds the club where he got the job and, based on surveillance, where he's staying. His subordinates don't usually make noise, but it's definitely the office where they operate. He asks the girl how much time he has left to live. Using the eye technique, she notices it's 14 and 9. She imagines it could be 14 hours and 9 minutes, or 14 minutes and 9 seconds. And since factors are greater than 12, it could represent 14 months and 9 days. Which leads to the possibility of it being 14 years and 9 months, or 14 days and 9 hours. Our protagonist thinks it's 14 years and 9 months, especially since he takes on a job every 2 weeks. Even if he asks his subordinate to do some work, finishing off 33 people in 14 days is enough time, while he keeps an eye on him and looks for an opportunity to send him away. He needs her to monitor his subordinates and take photos and videos of their faces. Additionally, he asks her to carefully observe the number above each of these henchmen. The girl is somewhat shocked by his request to have to deal with a bunch of grown men. He had indeed warned her that it was somewhat beyond her limits, which is why he's going to teach the girl how to use her eyes. In an ideal future, he will teach her how to use these numbers perfectly. While they still have time, he pulls out 2 firearms. One of them has an empty barrel, and the other is loaded. Asking the girl to choose between them by pressing one against her head and firing. He asks if she wants the right or left gun. Moji asks if he's joking, completely terrified, because it's impossible he's doing this. He simply says that if she chooses the unloaded gun, nothing will happen. However, if she chooses the loaded gun, her lifespan will reach 0. That's why he's doing this, to check the numbers that will appear to see how much life she still has. This way, she'll know which gun is loaded and which isn't. She should do the same thing she does with people, look at the remaining lifespan. If she understands the logic, it's quite simple, and she'll just have to use a few more brain cells, until she remembers that she saw her own remaining lifespan numbers on the day she almost went to a better place. He now asks her to focus on the numbers above her head, telling her to slowly close her eyes and focus on the numbers at the top of her head. She sees 9 and 4, but she gets scared and the numbers vanish. She says they appear as if floating in some kind of glass. Ignoring her strange talk, the number asks her to choose the right or left weapon. The girl chooses the left one, and he points it at her head. Seeing the numbers counting down in seconds, she asks him to stop. She screams that they are going down, and when he checks, the weapon was indeed loaded. G asks if he's trying to shoot her or test her skills. He says there's always a risk in everything, but as long as she can see the number, it will be easy to discover the truth. He now tells her to apply this method to every action she takes from now on. This way, she'll be able to turn around traps and dangers she couldn't see before. She'll be able to choose an ideal route to move safely, and taking pictures of their faces without getting caught will be very easy. Even for a weak little girl like her, she still hasn't said she'll do it, and like last time, she'll think of a way to save innocent lives. However, she's afraid of doing something wrong and ending up in danger, and thus just being a hindrance to him, making him wish he had done it alone without her. He doesn't believe that and asks why she's worrying so much. Even if she messes up, his numbers won't change. Nothing will stop him from eliminating his targets as usual. So he tells her to stop worrying because his plans aren't fragile enough for a little girl to ruin them. Next, they go to that extremely busy street again, and we see the guy with the scar and tattoos. And behind him is obviously the Dark Knight, the man of numbers. The method the number uses is always to predict the future. And Ji-hyun can also use her ability. He has to avoid any decrease in the numbers. If one of those numbers changes, it means he failed to eliminate one of his planned targets. And by failing to eliminate them, he also fails to save innocent lives. Lives of civilians that could have been protected by him. After all this, the number knows better than anyone that he cannot compromise his beliefs. Not even the slightest chance can make him decrease the numbers. Because just a single drop in the number can inevitably mark a deadline. And it's at that moment, after a cat knocks over a can. The tattooed man spots him and slams into him. The two clash in an intense, aggressive knife fight. After he dodges a few blows, the tattooed man says he's a little better than expected. Then he asks who he is and who is coming after him this time. The comic book hero fan takes off his mask to say something to him. This encounter marks the second time the anti-hero has faced a deadline. Suddenly, the tattooed man and his thugs burst into the place, startling everyone, ordering his soldiers to violently force everyone out, in addition to telling them to send the manager out. So, as they beat people, the guys look for their manager, the one with white hair. His soldiers start searching with him for the manager who must be hiding. They all beat several men until they find a white-haired man. The battered man asks, who are they and why are they doing all this? The man who looks like a yakuza performs a dental examination on him, but with a knife. On the floor, the manager begs him to spare his life and not send him to an early grave. The tattooed man finds him interesting and asks if he's begging the knife for him. The man cries, but there's no more time. He turns into nothing but a pile of ketchup. Very seriously, the tattooed yakuza says he did a good job and asks, who were these people? For the man in the suit, it was nothing more than another job he didn't care about. Meanwhile, the little girl manages to take photos of 7 of his henchmen, collecting photos of these crazy people as if she were hunting Pokemon. Imagining that these are the ones who haven't left the office yet, but they'll have to go home at some point. Entire days have passed since she started moving on her own, but she still hasn't had the chance to use her new ability. Although she tried to follow the ideal path, her numbers still haven't changed, but she understands that he said some things about taking risks, sometimes being important, thus making it easier to detect changes in the numbers. Meanwhile, the serial killer and the yakuza are locked in a brutal exchange. They unleash a barrage of strikes. Yet neither can land a decisive blow because both are exceptionally skilled. The tattooed man has no doubt he's facing a professional. Of course, he's Batman. He knows he must have engaged in sports, combat, and even mental games like chess or gambling. Anything involving systems with winners and losers, he must understand. When to attack or defend, and even which vital points to strike. He wonders if there's anything nearby he can use to gain an advantage. Whether to cut or strike, or to dodge or defend. All to be considered to gain an edge over his opponent. Yet, something doesn't feel right to him. It's practically impossible for him to have had the upper hand from the start of the fight. No matter how quickly he reacts, he's destined to always be one step behind his opponent's moves. But even so, he wonders why the gap between their blows seems to be shrinking. He feels as if his opponent is even a step ahead of him now. After all, Batman is always prepared. Instead of dodging after the tattooed man's attack, he seems to anticipate his movement, and dodges even before he attacks. However, he starts to think this is madness. Little does he know the anti-hero has his Shounen eye activated. What the number is doing is simple. If his number grows, it means he's on the right path, but if it reaches 0, it means he made a mistake. The only difference is that he applies his method to every action he takes, like a machine. While they need to use their eyes to observe the other numbers, they normally don't need to look at their own numbers, yet they are visible in their minds. The decisions they make lead to specific futures, and the numbers reflect their future. All these factors are processed in a few seconds in the emo superhero's brain. Therefore, the ideal path is created when a number cannot be changed. It is at this moment that he finally manages to land a blow on the tattooed man. finally injuring him, and then delivering a slamming kick to the man's chest. This goes beyond the comprehension of an ordinary person, but the number developed this system, which proves in practice that it works as soon as he takes the men down to the ground. Knowing that the guy's name is Choi Chong-hyuk, number 33. After finishing this man, he will be able to save the lives of 33 innocents. It is then that the genius Albert Einstein understands that he is the number criminal. He starts to laugh because everything begins to make sense in his head, and the fact that he predicted the future. He then says that he is just like that albino person. This already gives our protagonist traumatic war memories from so much trauma. He gets a completely blank expression on his face, triggering his trauma. Meanwhile, the girl starts to flee from the man's tattooed henchmen, even getting cornered by them. They offer her a potato chip, saying it will be Mo Ji-hyun's last meal. Our protagonist, having war memories, grabs the men by the collar and demands he repeat what he said about the albino girl who could see numbers just like him. Then the Yakuza man begins to have a flashback of a very violent day, where this albino girl was pummeling a group of people. Staring at her, the tattooed man says he lost his job because of her, who arrived first and eliminated his targets. He then asked who she was, and if she was also there to do a job. She explains that she is there because all these men she dealt with beat up children on the street, used violence, and she thought he was part of that group until, bizarrely asking if he is part of the group of good people. So he explains to our anti-hero that their case of having the same target happened in China. However, that was years ago, and he does not know exactly who the girl is. Taking advantage of the moment when the number is in shock upon learning this, the man slams him with a brick, a truly low blow. Even if he knew where the woman was he would not say, then shoves him away. Our protagonist immediately becomes alert and notices the number above the man changing. He knows he strained his eyes too much in a short period of time. Using it repeatedly, seeing the men plan his escape, and thinking about the fact that he met the albino woman who caused him trauma in China. He knows that now that he has escaped, he must be going to his home or his office. In the car, fleeing with his henchmen, he applies some bandages. They ask the boss if he is okay, and who did this to him. The moment he says it was the number criminal, everyone is shocked. At that moment, he calls Jun Byum, the man in the suit he spoke with earlier. He tells him on the phone that they caught a rat who had been sneaking around and spying on them since the other day. At first he was confused, wondering if she just seemed like a normal young girl, until he remembered that she is the daughter of the psychopath Mo Hyun Kale, who disappeared along with number. This makes perfect sense to the boss, who starts laughing and finds things interesting. He then says that he is being pursued by number at this very moment, ordering his men to get into their usual positions and be prepared. Number goes after him, not intending to let him escape, and it has been years since he had a lead on the albino woman. The tattooed man says they should give Number, the serial killer, a proper welcome, who, after driving for a long time, arrives at their base without making a sound. As soon as he enters a room, he notices the girl being held by Jun Byum, and the boss sitting in a chair. Seeing that he managed to reach them, he welcomes Number. He imagines she must be very special to him, as she is the only survivor he spared and brought along. He proposes a duel where the winner gets the girl, and he can leave without her, alive. But of course, if he refuses this offer, the girl will be gone. However, surprising everyone, he says he refuses, and the men can do whatever he wants, saying he doesn't care what happens to this girl, and in fact he's doing him a favor. The girl becomes very sad when she hears this, and they are confused. However, several of his henchmen appear at that moment. The Yakuza man says that if he lets fear take over, he will be lost, and he knows what to do, stating that the only way to survive his henchmen is by attacking them. But the men say that no matter his strength, he only has 2 arms, and they are a multitude. If each of them lands a hit, they can stab him at least 15 times. This is the agreement the henchmen make with the boss. Our protagonist tells him to refresh his memory in the meantime, as he has many questions for the men. Once he has remembered everything, and he has finished defeating them all, he says the boss will have to answer all his questions. Meanwhile, the tattooed man orders them to end the child's life. However, Mo Ji-hyun activates her ocular ability, remembering him talking about taking necessary risks and then saying he refused the boss's offer, saying they would even be doing him a favor. All of this pushed the girl to want to survive. The conversation where he said he would help her understand the difference between numbers and make choices that would prolong her life. Remembering everything he taught her, she wonders what she should choose in a situation like this. Meanwhile, the tattooed Yakuza man orders them to end Mo Ji-hyun's life. Ji becomes scared when our protagonist points a gun at her, and it looks like he's about to shoot. Her ocular ability activates. She wonders if she made the correct choice. After all, the number is large and she takes the shot, falling backward but surviving. He then starts firing other shots, and the Yakuza man wonders if he was bluffing when he picked up the gun. After that, a henchman strikes his hand, making him drop his firearm. But since our protagonist is prepared, he grabs a sharp weapon to strike this boss's henchman. Meanwhile, one of the other henchmen grabs our protagonist's weapon and prepares to fire, even taking a shot at the number. But nothing seems to happen to him. He only feels an impact. Meanwhile, he orders him to shoot again. Just then, the girl, still tied up, starts running away. At the same time, the protagonist attacks relentlessly and takes down several henchmen. He notices a girl escaping, and the boss orders Jean to go after her. As our protagonist scans the henchmen, he notices that 15 of them still remain. He comments that his Kevlar vest covers him from neck to thigh, which protects his main vital points. 2 individuals, whether they bear a number or not, cannot be eliminated by him. But just as he's thinking all this, the boss comes to attack him. Our anti-hero manages to block and then tries to attack him. He fails, and several henchmen already appear to help their boss. At this moment, the number increases to 16. He realizes it's a problematic gang. They don't retreat or fall with just a few cuts. Each of them charges at the number with everything they have, leaving him with no options. As they form a kind of barrier, the boss attacks to catch the men off guard. Again, he starts to feel that pain because of the eye he used too much. Then he takes a bat strike to the head from one of the henchmen, making him remember the albino girl telling him to give up because he was too weak. At this moment, he disarms one of the soldiers and ends his life. Counting, he says it was the 4th, and asks if the man has any last words or wishes. After he says nothing, he ends the life of another man while Moji is fleeing with everything she has. Seeing that through one of the doors her life timer remains the same, she knows she must go through the middle one. As soon as she enters it, the girl notices something on the wall, and the man pursuing her loses sight of her. Everything inside this room seems to slightly decrease her life, making her think she chose a path of no return, but 2 giant metallic doors keep her life timer high. However, no matter what she does, the remaining time doesn't exceed 3 minutes. Wondering what to do, she finds herself cornered. Meanwhile, the girl remembers the man saying that her number changed to 1 before she was eliminated. Somehow she still managed to change this and have the number reduced. And she remembers that moment when he went crazy, because her presence means something very different to him. After she remembers all this, the henchman Jean enters the room she's in. The man in glasses expects her to be aware that he cannot spare her life after this. After all, this is what happens when a child like her gets involved with a bad man like him. And he also comments on the fact that she is also the daughter of another serial killer. At that moment, the girl pulls a fire extinguisher hose from the wall, spraying water in the henchman's face to make him stop chasing her. While she said none of this would have happened in her life if it weren't for people like him. Suddenly, the man notices an open fuse box behind him. Realizing she's trying to get him electrocuted by the fuse box, a huge puddle forms on the floor, and the fuse box short circuits. Until all the lights in the room go out due to this short in the electrical system, the man is relieved to have survived. That was a close call with realizing that for the first time, the girl's decision wasn't based solely on numbers. Every move she made was carefully calculated. Then the protagonist realizes she can pull this off. The henchman and the boss get scared when the lights suddenly go out. He starts ordering everyone to turn on their phone flashlights, but before they can do anything, the killer takes advantage of being in the shadows, beginning to sweep through the area, dispatching the henchman, even finally finishing off the boss. And this decision allowed the numbers to move freely, as he wished, as if there were no solid, proven logic. However, every time she heard an explanation for one of the questions lingering in her mind, the man had said that the numbers never changed, unless the person was about to be eliminated. So she wonders why the numbers keep changing all the time, moment after moment, as if they were alive. How something that should never change keeps changing just because she thinks about what to do next. She remembers the serial killer talking about her having changed the number before being eliminated. Which is an absurd question, even though it's simple. After all, it's all she needs to do if she doesn't want to be eliminated, and she doesn't need to question it so much. However, if it's true that she can change numbers that were never meant to change, this is proven the moment our protagonist begins to decimate several henchmen. The moment the lights go out, and he manages to use his eyes to pinpoint and strike them. So all this means he can also achieve future prediction through numbers, and intercept destiny because of it. Again, we see the protagonist striking them all down in the dark. Because this decision allowed the number to move freely, as he wished. The only thing she could do was buy more time for herself, thus prolonging her lifespan enough to shape the future the way she needs. And the number could also dispatch his enemies however he wished. Meanwhile, the number tears through the crime boss's henchmen, striking them down one by one through his special vision that allows him to execute all this in the dark. The moment the crime boss hears all his henchmen being cut down, he already feels he's next. Then he strikes him down, saying they should start from the beginning and try again. So he starts recording a tape, and says the man's name, which is Choi Chong-hyuk, and the number of victims, 33. Holding him by his injured neck, he says that by eliminating him, he will be fulfilling someone else's wish. However, he will grant him the same right to a final wish. One that can be fulfilled by him, saying he can make a wish, as long as it's within his power to grant it. He says this is his last chance to tell him everything he knows about the albino girl who also sees numbers. The girl overhears this conversation, and the boss wants to know what happens if his wish is to stay alive. Our protagonist says it's not possible, because if he survives, he will eventually end the lives of 33 innocents. This is why he must end the man's life, so that civilians can continue theirs normally. The man starts to laugh, finding it a joke, as he's never met anyone as ignorant as him in his life, telling our protagonist that it makes no sense at all, saying his men won't stop just because they suddenly stop receiving orders from him. If one blade breaks, they simply replace it. Our protagonist says it's impossible to break all those blades. But he can't just sit by and do nothing watching him reap innocent lives. He then asks, filled with hatred, when the incident in China happened, and how he found out the woman could see numbers. The boss says she's in Korea right now. He takes advantage of our protagonist's indignation to try and end his life. However, his knife goes flying as he had already noticed the movement and throws it away. Before he dies, he says it will be a war between the lunatics who see numbers, and he says that if he fought so hard against the boss, he doubts he'll survive the real fight against those people. Soon after, the boss dies and falls silent, leaving a heavy atmosphere in the air. Noticing the girl behind him, he says it's time to leave. Moji asks what they should do with the men in glasses, and the protagonist says his number is 0. Saying they can't eliminate him because of that. Then the girl asks if he's okay with all of this. She also says she moved according to the numbers, just as he taught her. She even discovered something new, but before she could tell him, something happens. Our protagonist collapses down the stairs, his brain having reached its limit. In response, he began to sink deep into the corners of his mind. Deeper and deeper into his buried memories of his mysterious origin. Remembering a day in the classroom when the albino girl appeared. Excited by the appearance of a new classmate, the albino girl asked his real name. However, the protagonist told her he didn't have a name yet. It all began 19 years ago, before the number incident that ruined his life. He wonders when he had his first memory again. He remembers opening his eyes and trying to understand where he was, a memory that happened a long time ago. He has already forgotten, no matter how hard he tries to remember. He cannot recall anything before that day. An older woman was helping him, as he was collapsing on the street, freezing to death, asking if he would like to go with her and offering sincere help. He wonders if he took her hand that day or not. Somehow he found a book hidden under the table. It was a kind of comic book about a mysterious hero, which he immediately started reading. Several passages seemed to mirror his future life. At that moment, the albino girl appeared and asked if he was enjoying the book. She said she found a secret place where she discovered all these books. However, he couldn't tell the teacher, because she got into a lot of trouble the last time they found out. Our protagonist promised he wouldn't tell anyone, and then she asked how old he was, but he couldn't even remember how old he was at the time of that memory. Telling her he was between 5 and 6 years old, and she also didn't know his name. The schoolwoman told him that it was normal for boys his age who had gone through trauma. The teachers would eventually give him a name along with the other students. The girl thinks she's the strange type, ever since she started using the name she received at this orphanage. Anyway, he would probably be in class 1, which is on the first floor. And she was on the second floor, and he could call her Nuna. So the boy asked what her name was, and she said it was Soa. He asked if he could meet her again to read her comics. Soa said he could, as long as he stopped treating her so formally. Beneath some creeping vegetation and thick bushes, there was a mountain path leading to a very quiet place. There, a small school offered shelter for 27 students and 4 teachers. The children were divided between the first and second floors. That school and dormitory seemed to come straight out of a fairy tale, completely sealed off, as if from another world. It was in this place that he spent his childhood. The boys started calling him dumb back then. This friend invited him to have lunch with everyone else while he was isolated with his comic book. 16 years before the number incident. Showing that time had passed a bit from one memory to another. Our protagonist was reading an English dictionary he had borrowed from the library. Saying it had the same letters as a book he wanted to read, he began to learn English. The boy said he was smart, considering he couldn't read anything when he first arrived. At that moment, a bully bumped into him, knocking his book to the floor. They demanded an apology from him, but the bully said nothing. This friend of the protagonist demanded an apology because he had bumped into the boy while cutting in line. The bully didn't apologize, and the protagonist said it was fine. Then he stared at a girl, asking her to hand over his soup. The girl said she could only serve food in the order of arrival. Saying that he had cut the line, she couldn't serve him food like that. The teacher had announced that anyone who tried to cut the line would not be allowed to eat. The protagonist's friend thanked the girl for what she did. After that, he ate a lot at his friend's recommendation. Since they would have physical education class, they also told him to be careful not to get hurt afterward. Memories become blurry at times. The school seems somewhat dilapidated. Other times, it's not. He also trained with weapons alongside his friends to become strong. And they were well indoctrinated by the local teachers. Everyone exercised a lot for a long time. The teacher encouraged them to do their best. And the protagonist started to grow strong during that period. Training to become a ninja in the future, obvious, they trained very hard, fought fiercely among themselves, and even used knives. They were also advised not to leave the school. The children engaged in earnest brawls, choking each other and more. They said that the people on the outside were very immature and idiotic. And that these people wouldn't understand the mission of those children there. They said they couldn't be tempted by the outside world and its ignorant people. The Class 1 teacher understood how difficult and painful their lives were before they arrived at the school. The pain each of them suffered was slightly different. However, the suffering they felt was not their fault. War, poverty, and the survival of the fittest. That's why the world is in ruins. Blinded by greed, people don't even realize they are marching towards destruction. This is precisely why the Great Mother Charlotte built this orphanage. While they trained their shots, they also heard about the word of this goddess mother. The goddess mother said that even if they abandoned themselves, she would embrace all fools and lead them to the future. All evildoers and heretics who tried to prevent this would be dealt with by her apostles and disciples. All students with shining eyes and strange features were these disciples with incredible potential. Those who would not defeat the villains alongside the goddess mother to change the world. Perhaps they could still become children like themselves with good hearts. For this to happen, they would have to pay attention to what the teacher said and study hard. After all that strange talk, lunchtime arrived and the school's atmosphere changed, making it seem like a normal school. She asked the class representatives to lead the greetings. One of our protagonist's friends bandaged his own hand after the training, which was so intense, saying it was a type of injury he sustained during training that was inevitable. After the afternoon and the end of the training session, he always had an hour of rest. The lights went out at 10:30, and he remembered that a teacher would stay awake at night, watching over them, locking every window and door so they couldn't leave. Considering the camera security system installed throughout the place, escaping or sneaking through the orphanage at night was practically impossible. Of course, none of these children even tried to go outside it. During the night, they talked among themselves, wondering if what the teacher said was really true. He doubted it, because the teacher said that even if they doubted, the more they learned, their eyes would open to the truth. And the key was strange, because it wasn't how it appeared in the comics and magazines he read. His friend said he had been acting strange lately because of the girl on the second floor. Even though our protagonist denied it, and he kept reading his comic books non-stop about the story of a masked hero who faced a pig crime boss. This concept of hero and villain always stayed in the boy's mind as he read the magazines. He remembered what the teacher said about those who would defeat villains to help the mother goddess change the world. At that moment, the white-haired girl took the books from his hand. Our protagonist asked what Nuna was doing. Just then, the school owner appeared, saying she had left her suitcase behind. That's when he understood why his friend had hidden the books and pretended they were studying. The woman's only advice was not to skip dinner to study, but she was happy to see them there. The girl was annoyed with him because he almost got caught again for being too immersed in his books. Another year passed in that orphanage, bringing him to 15 years old before the number incident. Again, his friend was scolding him because he should be more attentive and almost got caught again, and that would make it even harder for them to go outside. After all, it was very difficult for her to steal these things secretly and not get caught. He asked if she could take him along the next time she went outside. Nuna didn't mind him coming along. She just wanted to understand why this sudden change. Our protagonist wanted to see what was in this place with all those piles of books. Besides the comics, he didn't just want to keep hearing from the teachers, he wanted to go check out the outside world for himself. When his friend heard what he said about seeing the world for himself, she considered going that very day. She did some calculations and said they could go that same night. Seeing his reaction, she asked why he was backing out if he was the one who wanted this. Nuna said the conditions for that day were good, and after that they would have to wait 9 more days. After she asked if he wanted to go, the boy immediately waited for nightfall. He put a pile of clothes and a basketball under the covers to pretend it was him sleeping. And he woke up at 2 in the morning specifically to execute this plan. Then she would go to the first floor and he should leave the dormitory door open. However, if he did it carelessly, the teacher on night watch could catch him. He always wondered how she got in and out without being caught if the doors and windows were locked. That day, he saw her coming down the stairs from the second floor to the first, warning the girl that the teacher was very close to them, asking him to wait a bit and then sneak past. However, the albino girl walked right past the bespectacled teacher without a care. Noticing that the teacher was drugged and there was something in her tea, So they went out together in the middle of the night without any problems. In his memory of the past, the boy was shocked to see his teacher drugged. While Nuna hurried the boy to go outside quickly. However, all the windows were locked, including the doors. Saying that the teachers usually lock the corridor doors and the bathroom windows. However, there's one door they locked and then forgot about, the one to the storage room. She secretly swapped the lock for one she could open herself. The boy wondered how she managed to change the locks. However, she didn't even remember exactly how. She just found it and thought it might be useful later. She picks up some things from the teacher's office when they're not around and finds some useful items there. There's also a place in the basement that looks like a lab. That's where she found the drug she used in the teacher's tea. She tested it by mixing small doses into the teacher's coffee, and the social studies teacher was the most careless. So it had to be when she was on night duty, coinciding with the full moon, which would only be on Monday and Tuesday. If it wasn't on that day, they would have to wait a long time to do it again. While all this explanation was happening, the boy got a little upset and told Nuna to wait, asking if it was right to do this because the teacher could get seriously hurt. The girl said she had tested it a few times and the teacher would be fine. She probably wouldn't even remember what happened the next day. Then she told him to be careful when jumping because the height there was greater than it seemed. When they reached a certain spot, they stopped moving because of the security cameras. After all, they all rotate to cover the area, so they needed to move at the moment when none of the cameras were covering the area. Now he asks if it's time because they're looking the other way and the girl asks to wait longer. Then she explains the order in which the cameras cover the locations and how many seconds they stay there. It's a boring, nerdy explanation that doesn't matter. She explains that the next blind spot will occur in many seconds when the cameras are no longer pointing their way, saying they should wait for about 3 minutes until that happens. Our protagonist asks how many times she went back and forth to figure out this entire camera pattern. She says it was about 600 times, but the point is she didn't calculate it. She can just see it somehow. She says she's been wandering the school since she was a child, imagining all the security is because of her, but no matter what they try, they can't stop her adventurous spirit. They can block her, but she'll find a way to bypass it and keep exploring. Until they started putting people on night watch, that hindered her. She notices the boy can't stop thinking about the state they left the teacher in, and our protagonist reveals he was scared by the affection on her face. They continue to learn that everyone there was blessed in the same way by the mother goddess. Aside from training moments, no one in this orphanage can hurt each other, and they learn that people on the outside are bad. Which is why they shouldn't leave and should always listen to the teachers. Then she hugs her friend and says that, just as Dum said, it might be dangerous to do this. She comments that if this drug is so dangerous, she questions why the teachers would leave it there in the first place, and also in a place where children are not allowed to enter. She asks if he also felt there was something strange about this place, being one of the reasons that led him to want to go with her to see the outside. She questions if hitting others is wrong. Then his comic book character is also bad for hitting villains. However, the protagonist thinks not, because the villains started doing bad things first. Then the girl says that the teachers did this by locking them up, and that's why she does what she can. If they are bad people, then it's okay to do bad things to them too. After that, she stands up because there are only 20 seconds left to cross the area. Pointing to a tree, she tells him he must run there within 10 seconds. She asks if Dum knows that besides classes 1 and 2, there's an honor class for those with a certain talent. Next year, she will graduate from class 2 and move to the honor class. She says that if he has that same talent and meets those conditions, he can enter that room. If that happens, she will tell him everything about what she intends to do and about the plans she's making. She will tell him everything, without exceptions. At that moment, he had already begun to manifest his numerical ability. Looking back, he thinks it started that day. Maybe it was a little later. He even thinks it was well after. He can't be too specific, but he knew he couldn't interfere much. Even though it's obvious now, looking back then, he thought it was just a trick of his eyes. Regarding the numbers and their meanings, he started noticing them clearly 1 year after the manifestation, reaching the date 14 years before the number incident that is happening now. Then the owner of the place appears to say that it's been half a year since they arrived in class 2. That's why I'm going to have a counseling session for the first time in a long time with the science teacher. As she calls out the students' names, they go to the council. First, they call number 1, the protagonist's friend Han Jaeol, who was admitted there 7 years ago. He has a high ranking because he's good at training, shooting, and academics. The science teacher says that among his peers, he proved to be the most motivated. Han Jaeol said he did all of this because he wanted to be special. He always wanted to enter the honor class and graduate with one of the highest rankings, thus being able to work directly alongside the mother goddess. And now he understands that if it weren't for his teachers and friends, he wouldn't know he is so precious and special. He would have been ignored and mistreated by his father, eventually withering and losing his purpose. Meanwhile, another girl is accused of lacking motivation because it's her 5th year since her admission. Among her peers, she is at the top in many aspects, but deep down, when it comes to training, asking if she is afraid to hurt others and punish evil in the name of the mother goddess. The girl said that's not it. She just prefers to study hard and be useful, and she understands that compared to her other peers, she is weak. Then it's Kong Chang's turn, who is in his 6th year of admission. He has a terrible academic brain, but he compensates in training. Asking if he has any body problems and if he has burning eyes or constant headaches. Meanwhile, the science teacher removes the premonition symptoms from his eyes. Right away, our protagonist says he frequently feels all of that and is also in his 6th year of admission. He said these sensations started about a year ago. His professor wished he had mentioned it sooner. He also asked if he had ever seen anything like numbers. At that exact moment, our protagonist saw the number 11 above the man's head. He remembered what his friend said about students with special talents going to the honor class. She said the requirements were very strict and few people would go there. The boy wasn't sure if it was a number, but it looked like a moving heat wave. The professor immediately filled out the boy's form, noting that he was experiencing premonition symptoms. After finishing the questions, he noticed the boy was the last in line. So he asked him to take the other students to the science lab in the basement. The professor said that year's harvest was good. He then took all the students who had gone before. The top student in the class didn't even know there was such an underground corridor, and the girl smelled a foul odor. When the bully asked, our protagonist said the location was to the right. He saw the number 2 above the men's heads and the number 1 above the girls' heads. It had been a year since he started seeing the numbers without knowing their meaning. At this point, he could freely control when the numbers appeared and disappeared from his sight. The reason he had hidden it on purpose was after seeing the professor's alarming reaction. He thought merely saying he had seen something would be enough to get into the honor class. However, he realized too late what was truly happening there. He saw his science professor with a tied-up man covered in tomato sauce. He told the students that there were always bad people like these around, desperate to find something they could take for themselves, sneaking through the forest to secretly film their orphanage. That's why this professor always tells them to be careful when moving outside the building. He asked everyone there who would start and placed a gun on the table. The insane professor said the first person to shoot would be immediately accepted into the honor class. He said that at such a close distance, they didn't have to worry about missing the shot. He grabbed the girl's shoulder saying she was very scared, so she should be the first to shoot. He encouraged the girl to do this crazy thing because she had once said she would have the courage to do it. He began to manipulate her, asking if what she had said about wanting to be stronger like the others was a lie. Typical of mad scientists, he made the girl start aiming at the men in the suit. He said she no longer needed to hesitate and could just shoot, even knowing it was a process for her because by overcoming the instinct of fear, her spirit would become stronger. He forced her to commit this crime, otherwise he would end her classmate's life. At that moment, the number 1 appeared above her head in our protagonist's vision and she began to cry. However, it wasn't her who shot, but the other boy who snatched the gun from her hand. He fired a shot at the man who was tied up and had a bag over his head, leaving our protagonist with a lifelong trauma. The number above the boy's head decreased to 1. Then he dropped the gun on the floor and asked if the test was over, saying that if one candidate had already succeeded, then the test could come to an end. However, the science teacher started laughing and opened a curtain, saying there were still 3 more people left from those they caught spying on the orphanage, commenting again that whoever did it first would have an advantage. That the first to shoot and eliminate these people would go straight to the honor class. If 2 of the 3 remained, he would do the same thing. A fun scavenger hunt typical of Jigsaw, and he wouldn't send the last person back to class without them passing to the honor class. If they thought they couldn't do it, he would help them the same way he did before. While he was torturing the students, the albino girl was holding a firearm behind the door, making our protagonist hold. He realized it wasn't even a test, since their 4 promotions had been decided. That was discipline, and they were forced to experience heavy things and eliminate people, all to transform them into a usable mental state. They did a job to create a foundation, forcing our protagonist to shoot, otherwise his friend would pay the price for it. The albino girl was waiting to enter and have a little party. Knowing that the new group of people was coming, she passed by just as a precaution. Compared to the past, the teacher really hadn't changed anything for her. Even though it's ahead of schedule, they know everything will be fine, even if they move some things around. So, counting the interval of the footsteps and their force, she knew it was the teacher, like a motorcycle helmet, who performs the night watch of the place and seems to be able to sense her presence. Asking if she was just a student and what floor and class she was from, knowing she must be the one who stole the training pistol and swapped it for a fake. She began to aim at the men, not even in his shadow. However, he turned off the lights and activated the emergency ones. And he ran past very quickly, making her fire desperately. The shots slammed into the glass, and the science teacher realized someone was there. Furthermore, the shots pierced the man's helmet, but he used the helmet as a decoy and wasn't actually hit, revealing his face and drawing his firearm against her. However, just as he was about to shoot, the science teacher opened the door to assess the situation. The girl got cover from the door, and the man accidentally fired. The bullets were darts that almost hit the teacher. Then he asked why the teacher was without his helmet and doing all this. He found a white strand of the albino girl's hair and said it was nothing serious, and asks how the new class's promotion ceremony is going. In response, the science teacher says everything is great, they just finished the approval process. With all the students exhausted and traumatized for life, our protagonist can't clearly remember how he got back to the dorm. Something between vision and reason made him feel as if there was a white film over the entire scene. After they returned for about a week, no one said anything, and the numbers he saw above each other's heads began to disappear one by one. After that, the teacher said that the 4 new honor class students had arrived. They switched classes and were introduced to the new room with 3 others who were already there. All of them would now be classmates in the honor room, forming 7 students. One of them being the albino girl, friend of our future anti-hero. He went up to the roof like a zombie and found Nuna there. They meet on the roof, and she hands him the new volume of the comic book he's a fan of, a gift for getting into her class. Saying it took a lot of effort for her to steal another edition of that comic for him. Commenting that it's been 6 years since they first saw each other, and now they'll finally be able to see each other every day. But the kid is still traumatized by the visions that led him to the honor room and starts to vomit. The boy even gets a little annoyed with her, and the white-haired girl helps him compose himself, asking him if he can also see the numbers, just like her. After all, she understands he possesses a special ability because she also sees the same thing. Our protagonist is impressed that his friend also sees the numbers, just like him. She said she would explain everything to him once he entered the honor class. However, in her case, when she looks at someone, she sees the number of people that person will save in the future. People in danger can see how many lives they will rescue. After that, she tells Dom that they can destroy the orphanage and get rid of the teachers to be free. Together, just the 2 of them could easily do that and become heroes. Just like in the comic books, he reads about the guy in the crow outfit. The boy is shocked to understand that the numbers she sees are about people she will save. Then she asks how many people the 2 of them together can save. Then he asks how she knows what her numbers mean. The girl doesn't answer and asks if he doesn't know what his numbers mean yet. She didn't expect that and asks him to remember clearly again. The first moment the numbers he sees changed. She knows that for over a year, the numbers haven't changed at all. They started to decrease one by one at that moment the day before. Then the girl asks if anything comes to his mind and he sees an exorbitant number above her head. Then he asks if Nuna is serious about burying the teachers. The girl smiles and says yes because it will be easier than he thinks. In the end, they want to cultivate children who are voluntarily loyal to them. They don't try to supply them with force or control them physically. After all, at first they act like a family, creating bonds and ties like good teachers. And after making them feel dependent on this, so they can never take their own initiatives again. None of these teachers are, if you look beneath the layers, they're just ordinary people. Ordinary people who won't survive if they're caught off guard while sleeping. Our protagonist is disgusted hearing her terrifying plan. Nuna says her only problem is the teacher who wears a motorcycle helmet. She doesn't think she can handle that teacher alone and tried to snoop around the area. So she forms a plan that must be executed on November 17th of next year, which is the only day of the year the helmeted teacher will be on vacation. First, they must eliminate all remaining teachers and take control of the orphanage. Second, deal with the helmeted teacher when he returns the day after his. Finally, find the person who established the orphanage, the mother goddess Charlotte. And finally, rip her from her position, her facilities, and her connections. The helmeted guy and the mother goddess won't be easy to face alone. However, the fact that he met her while browsing comics that day and the fact that they possess special superpowers is a matter of destiny. That's why she extended her hand to him, asking him to join her in this plan so they could defeat the villains and become heroes together, a beautiful and healthy romance story. The boy remained thoughtful on the floor for a long time. Then he asked if that was why she had asked him to go to the honor class. After all, during the promotion ceremony, she wanted him to see how bad the teachers truly are and at the same time take someone's life because now he would be capable of doing the same to the teachers alongside her. Actually, she says that wasn't her true intention. However, by being in the honor class, he can learn more about his eye superpowers. The teachers want them to acquire individuality even if they don't have expectations for the honor class, but if a student with an ability appears, it's like they've won the lottery. Our protagonist asks if his friend also had to eliminate someone from her ceremony. He can't get out of his head the things he learned, which were ways to hurt and end people's lives. For him, it was just knowledge to achieve a high ranking and avoid getting scolded by the teachers at school. Our protagonist thought they were just things he had to know and never thought of using them in practice. He imagines it's the same for the other students who always pretended to be rebels, saying that he was the same way, always pretending these things and never thinking like that. Nuna says that if they all continue like this, in the future they will become as bad as the teachers. Our protagonist says he will run away soon, saying that he won't interfere with the girl's plan and that he will escape with his friends, taking advantage of the opening. Then he hands her the comic, stating that he cannot be a superhero like the crow from the comic book. After that, he, unaware that in the future he will become just like the guy from the comic book. Recalling this memory in the future, he gets angry at his past self, repeating countless times that he was wrong and should have gotten out of that situation. That he should have ended the girl's life right then and there, because the number above her head was too high and very suspicious. He should have understood that those were the people she would eliminate in the future. He blames himself, thinking he should have questioned why she said she would destroy the orphanage and the fact that she didn't mention wanting to eliminate the children there as well. Remembering what she said about doing bad things to bad people, just like in the Crow comic book, Nuna insisted it was easy to do and didn't understand why Dom didn't think like her. Recalling the past, the protagonist believes his child self should have finished her off that day. 1 year after that day, the helmeted teacher left on his vacation day. The awaited November 17th arrives and the girl picked up the weapon, preparing to start the plan. All of this happened 12 years before the number incident began, as we see it now. Then January 16th arrives and our protagonist used the tricks he learned from Nuna when he was younger, secretly creating an escape route at the time. Detail by detail, he filled in the empty spots on the mountain path of the map. He and Nuna stopped talking after that difficult conversation. It wasn't out of anger or a fight, but the ambiguity felt strange. He couldn't deal with it. Then March 7th arrives when his friends were dismissed from their duties that month. After that, his two friends saw their numbers drop to 0 after committing a few more crimes. And then he finally understood the meaning of the numbers he always saw. He was shocked by the enormous number of people the albino girl was going to put an end to. He tried not to think about it, as it was the lives of the students or pupils. And it was already July 28th, convincing his friends wasn't easy, and his female friend became even more apathetic than she already was. And the bald guy's violent behavior became greater and more noticeable. He couldn't quite explain it, but he felt like everyone else, broken in some way. In October, with little time left until November, he still didn't know if Nuna would succeed with her plan or not. As for him, he just wanted to get as many children as possible out of that place during that time. He questioned if he would be able to convince the other two friends in the honor class. Meanwhile, in the classroom, the teacher was evaluating our protagonist. The teacher told the red-haired student to be careful of the darkness in the hallway. She then began to explain Dum's plan and say that he is a strange boy with twisted talk. She talks about the strange things he writes in his diary, which she believes are not his real feelings. The teacher said she knows this, that they shouldn't worry, and that she will talk to Dom. She also asks them to tell her if anything similar happens with their, saying that he needs to guide his classmates to his side. However, the albino girl manages to hear everything with listening devices. She says it's a shame because it's the diary only she was secretly reading. Until finally, November 16, 2012 arrives, the moment the helmeted teacher starts to leave, and she prepares her revenge. This being 12 years before the number serial killer incident. In a chase, one of the teachers was already wounded, running after the girl with a gun in her hand, firing at Nuna, who didn't even need to move to dodge. She asks the teacher what was wrong, telling her she should have eliminated her. Entering the woman's mind, she says there's no way a pistol at that distance wouldn't hit her. The teacher screamed that she wouldn't get away with it. Mocking the teacher, she begins to teach the correct way to shoot, she fires a shot into her teacher, and the number count decreases, indicating she eliminated the woman. Her science teacher says she learned very well and also begins to fire his firearm at her, commenting that he taught the albino girl how to use weapons very well. However, the girl manages to take cover behind a door, avoiding the shots, counting all the shots he fired until he would run out of ammunition. As soon as he runs out of ammunition and tries to reload, the girl throws a lab coat over him, obstructing his vision and lunging at the long-haired teacher. She remembers telling Dum that in the future, they could save many people together, but that could only happen by eliminating the teachers first. Again, her number count decreases as she eliminates this teacher. Our protagonist hears the gunshots upstairs and realizes her plan has begun, encouraging his friend to escape through the bedroom window while this happens. The next moment, the white-haired girl is pointing a gun at the chubby teacher. The teacher reveals that she has been arrogant from the beginning until now. She thought a moderate amount of rebellion could be useful, which is why she allowed her to be that way. But in the end, she only betrayed the teacher, not understanding the grace behind her upbringing. Nuna says she's doing well not to admit her mistakes. Even at the very end, she shouldn't abandon everything as if she has achieved enlightenment. As a villain, she should cry and fight in a shameful and horrible way until the end of her life. Smiling, the girl asks for a bit of this chaos and catharsis. However, someone appears and puts a knife to her neck to stop her. A student wearing black clothes tries to prevent her from carrying out her revenge. The teacher apologizes that she isn't the only one who can see the numbers in this term. Another person appears, pointing a gun at her, saying she isn't the only one who sees the number. Seeing the two other people who are always in the honor room now against her, asking what they are doing as she was trying to save them. The girl with bangs finds it funny because no one asked her to do that. He said that graduating at the top was near and becoming a subordinate of the mother goddess was too. The teacher said if it wasn't for her ruining everything, things could have been different. Nuna starts thinking about the comic book where the crow takes revenge on the villains. She realized all the students had already been contaminated by the school's strange indoctrination, thinking it might be too late to bring them back to their senses. That's why she now considers them villains too and points her weapon at them. It was then that she began firing at the students she had grown up with, leaving our protagonist and his friend terrified, making them create a barricade against the door to prevent her from invading. He said he had been watching the window and realized it was blocked. His red-haired friend appears, pointing a gun at Tam and telling him to stop and slow down, saying they had all been made fools of by Nuna. In the comic book, criminals attacked the city's people. A man watching from above warns the superhero that the villains had taken control of the city and that Clow would need reinforcements to deal with all of them. For the hero, all that mattered was saving people in danger. And he says a cheesy line about having brought his coat that day. Back to reality, Nuna, all covered in blood, comments to herself that she wasn't wearing a coat. Remembering the comic books, right in front of her, there's one hanging and she smiles because in her disturbed mind, she was supposed to be wearing that. She puts it on and leaves the room, thinking about what her superhero name should be. At her feet lay fallen criminals, just like in the story. Or at least that's how they looked in her mind, since in reality, they were completely different people. Meanwhile, Dam and his friend find themselves with nowhere to run. The young man doesn't know what to do now. The window they would escape through is blocked by a pile of chairs. Han Jul appears behind them, telling them to stop what they were doing and turn to him slowly. He says the two of them had been tricked by Noon. Not understanding anything, Dam asks his friend what was happening. The redhead, knowing what was, told the other orphans to hide so they wouldn't participate in the escape. His plan was to let the teachers catch Nuna, and he tells his friends to stop the escape idea and join the others who were hiding. Jul starts remembering everything that happened at her graduation and panics. Seeing her situation, Dam asks his friend to lower the weapon. He didn't need to do this, but for the redhead, his friend should learn to overcome her fears. She couldn't always be protected. Realizing he was completely caught up in the teacher's brainwashing, the serial killer drew his dagger, determined to escape that place. He tries to convince his friend again, insisting that the redhead must have already realized there was something wrong with that place. Even trembling, the redhead insists that the teachers were right. There was no reason for them to have lied. It was they who hadn't dedicated themselves enough. Crying, he himself questions that if everything there was a lie, then why had they gone through all of that? In the 10 years he had been there, he had to kill 2 people. So even if they left, what would their lives be like from then on? Dayum lowers his dagger and asks the redhead not to think about it, saying he has a book that says they are just children. It's the adults who did this to them who are wrong and should be held accountable for everything. He reaches out to his friend, asking him to escape with him. And at that exact moment, Nuna appears in the room. The 3 of them look at her in shock. If she managed to get there, it meant Han Gil's plan had. Looking at the redhead, she says distractedly that he was the one who had exposed Dayum's plan to the teachers. Once again in the comic book, Claw's partner reveals he had discovered who the criminals were. They were all students, trained since childhood by the mentor, a villain they had defeated 10 years ago. The children were trained in isolation from the world and didn't know the difference between right and wrong. Now they had become criminals who hurt people to get revenge for their master. Almost struck by one of these villains, the hero's partner confesses that it was his fault, that he should have finished them all when he had the chance years ago. Returning to Nuna, she asked Dayum to step back as she was going to save him. The boy is in shock, as if it were nothing. With just one shot, she took down the friend he wanted so badly to save, but it didn't stop there. She wouldn't let you'll leave alive either. As she prepared for another shot, Gang Chan appeared armed near the door, ready to attack. Despite the element of surprise, he didn't stand a chance against the girl. In her mind, people would be grateful for everything she had done, just like in the comic books she read. In reality, Dayum felt terrible. There wasn't a shred of gratitude in his eyes for what she had done. In another room, more students were trying to escape through the windows, destroying the padlock that locked them in the orphanage. Nuna appears there too, ready to finish off everyone present. Before she could do what she planned, Dayum pushed her to stop her. The shot she fired hit a window, which shattered, and the shards rained down on him. The boy screamed in pain from the cuts on his face. Around him lay several fallen students who hadn't managed to escape. He yelled at Nuna desperately, asking why she was doing this. She simply replied that no one else would do it, so she had to. After all, they would all grow up and become criminals. Or, as in the comics, those children would all become villains. Outraged and desperate, Dayum ran towards her, still asking why. At the orphanage door, a student in his last moments begged Mr. Helmet to save them. The men looked towards the stairs, realizing something was happening on the second floor. Upstairs, Nuna and Dayum were there. She dropped the gun she was using now that it was out of bullet. Then she grabbed a knife, just in time to block Dayum's attack. As the two faced each other, he asked how she could know what all those children would become in the future. After all, she didn't have the ability to see the same numbers he did. Reading his diary, Nuna knew he could see the number of people someone would kill. She blames Dayum for being careless, which is why his diary was read by Han Joel, who blindly trusted the teachers and thus betrayed him. However, his friend knew it wasn't quite like that. Even after doing what he did, the redhead trembled when he spoke to them, unsure of what he should truly do. If it weren't for her, perhaps the redhead would have switched sides. Nuna disarms Dayum and asks how he could be so sure that children who grew up in that kind of environment wouldn't cause problems later. Did he really believe that orphan children, thrown into a world completely different from what they had known, would be able to adapt? She was certain they wouldn't, and because of that, they would remain on the fringes of society and have to survive in the darkness, living among criminals where they could use the skills they learned during their time at the orphanage. This would create a cycle of violence that would harm innocent people. The young man asks if these absurd theories she created were the reason she did all of it. For her, there was nothing absurd about it. It was just reality. Unarmed, he charges at the albino girl and slams her to the ground. Pinning her down, he roars that they weren't criminals and she couldn't judge them. How could she know what they would become when they grew up? Whether it was Han Giil, all of them had the number 0 above their head, so they wouldn't kill anyone else. Nuna retorts that it was obvious. They wouldn't kill anyone else because she eliminated them before that could happen. For her, it was the number 0 didn't mean they wouldn't kill anyone else because they decided not to, but rather because she eliminated them and prevented that future. With a wide smile, she states that there was no way he could be sure any of them would have changed for the better in the future. Desperate, Diane grabs a gun and points it at her. Deep down, she wished the two of them had done things together. After all, they both could see the numbers and they liked the same comic books. They both shared the same outlook on life, so she wanted them to be together. But then, he refused the plan to kill all the teachers. Reluctant to kill, even knowing she would eliminate 137 people. He was a coward who couldn't decide on anything in life, even when she dropped the gun on the floor, giving him a chance to kill her. Nuna jabs an injection into his neck, all while continuing to say he was too weak to be a hero. The girl gets to her feet as Diane collapses to the floor, overcome by the substance. With the gun in her hand, she says she didn't think Mr. Helmet would return so soon and asks if he had managed to celebrate his daughter's birthday, showing that the man was actually Hyan Chihiolemo, meaning Jihyonemo's father. With a serious expression, he asks, even though he's certain if she was responsible for it. The girl simply smiles in response and the two open fire on each other. Later, Diane wakes up and realizes he was alone in the room and his dagger was broken. He was the only survivor. The boy walks alone through the orphanage corridors until his legs give out and he collapses to the floor. Then he sees Hanjiology asking if he was okay. With a smile and no injuries, he says he's fine and calls his friend to lunch. Life at the orphanage seemed completely normal. The redhead asked about the book his friend was reading. Diane says he picked up the book because the cover was interesting. The story was about a train with broken brakes. The train was heading towards 5 people tied to the tracks, but if someone pulled a lever, it would change course. However, by doing so, the train would head towards another person tied to the tracks. So he asks what choice his friend would make in such a situation. Hanjiology confesses he wouldn't know what to do and asks what his friend would do. For him, it was better to lose only one person than 5. After a moment of silence, the redhead questions if that was the choice he would make, asking why he hadn't finished off Nuna to save all of them. His image turns bloody as he continues, saying that Diane was the only one who knew the meaning of the numbers. What was at stake was not just the lives of 5 people but wanton 37, and even so, he had done nothing. Diane shouts desperately that the redhead didn't understand. That he had no idea Nuna would really kill his friend and everyone in the orphanage. Hangeology asks if he would have let her do what she wanted if his friends were spared, calling him selfish. Behind him, Nuna appears, saying he should have done something, just as it had happened on their graduation day. He should have made up his mind. The boy runs, hearing that if he had made a decision, he would have realized that a life would have to be sacrificed one way or another. If he hadn't run from reality, he would have realized that the best choice was to have eliminated the science teacher when he was off guard. Sitting at a table, Diane asks how she could make decisions without even hesitating. While he didn't trust himself to make the right decision, did the people tied to the tracks deserve to live? Could they make the world a better place? He didn't feel he had the right to make that kind of decision. It didn't make sense. Then he remembered the teacher's words about them being the chosen ones who would fight villains under the godmother's guidance and what Nuna had said earlier. That they had all become criminals. Crying, he understood that none of them had rethought these beliefs. In the end, they were all the same, seeing themselves as righteous while everyone else was evil. They sacrificed people based on their own ideas of justice. While perhaps none of them were true, Diane confessed that he now understood everything. That he should have eliminated Nuna before she killed his friends. Only then could he reach the true number above their heads. Would they have changed for the better? Or would it reveal they would become murderers? Nuna questioned what he would have done if their numbers revealed they wouldn't become good people. Would he have the courage to eliminate them? No, because he was too weak. The boy decided he would no longer hesitate. There would be no exceptions, and he would leave behind his silly ideas about the world. Unlike all of them, he had decided he would be impartial. Every life would hold the same weight. He wouldn't do it out of heroism, but as an execution based on reason. With the decision made, he advanced towards Nuna, determined to slice her throat with the dagger. Diane would prove that those numbers didn't diminish, that they were established by clear rules and principles. If Nuna were still alive somewhere, there was something he wanted to ask her before eliminating her. He wanted to know how many lives he would save during his lifetime. He needed to find the answer to hear the voices. Back in the present, he woke up in the car with Ji Hyunmo beside him. The girl who was enjoying a snack was startled by him suddenly sitting up. Sweating, he wanted to know where they were. Irritated, Diane questioned who gave her permission to eat the treats he had hidden. As he started to ask how much she had eaten, a searing pain struck his head, making him fall back onto the bed. Worried, the young woman asked if he was okay. But he didn't even have the strength to reply. The previous night, he had completed his mission, even though it had almost cost him his life. As they were leaving the location, she commented that she had paid attention to her own number just as he had asked. And with that, she had noticed something, but before she could say what it was, he collapsed on the stairs, falling towards her. Since he was very heavy, she couldn't even hold his body to prevent the fall. After calling out to him several times, Diane woke up, and by his look, he was not well at all. Back in the car, Ji Hyunmo was recounting that when he woke up on the stairs, tears of blood were streaming down his face. Besides not responding to anything she said during their journey there, when they parked, he immediately laid down on the bed and stayed there until now. Diane explained that this happened because he had overused his eye. And when that happens, he faints and loses 2 or 3 days worth of memory. Concerned about how long he had been unconscious, he asked what day it was. According to her, 2 days had passed since he lost consciousness. It was December 3rd. The answer irritated him, and he drove off without saying where they were going. Seeing that Ji Hyun needed an explanation, he said they were going somewhere far away, where he could heal his eye. The fact that he had cried blood meant his eye was already injured beforehand. This meant he couldn't predict the best possible outcome when he fled the crime scene, as he usually did. He might have left something behind that would serve as evidence. However small, it could become a clue for the police to find them. It was a miracle they had stayed so close to the crime scene for 2 days without being discovered. Ji Hyun recalled that she had been worried about watching their numbers as they escaped. That didn't seem important to him, as what she saw was people's lifespans. And that wouldn't decrease if someone was arrested. The girl didn't understand why he had trained her if it was all for nothing. Annoyed, Daeum wasn't trying to blame her. What had happened was his fault. For the past 40 days, he had used his eye relentlessly to try and predict the best possible future. He knew that soon he would overload what his eye could do. The girl asked if he did it because of that silver-haired woman. Since he knew what would happen if he overused his power, she tried to remember the woman's name and started saying variations of Nuna out loud because she couldn't recall the name properly. With that, Daeum slammed on the brakes, making the girl hit her head on the car's dashboard. He wanted to know how she had found out the woman's name. She confessed that she wasn't trying to invade his privacy or anything like that, but when he passed out, he kept muttering the woman's name the whole time. Even if she didn't want to pay attention, he kept mumbling her name. Perhaps embarrassed, he asked her to stop talking. With an awkward atmosphere in the car, Ji Hyun asked if he was angry with her, and he did. The girl wasn't trying to provoke him, but she thought it was time for him to tell the truth, why he did what he did and what shaped him into such a person. Elsewhere, a police officer was conducting an interrogation, asking the person in front of him not to lie. A little earlier, he had arrived at the police station with 2 other officers. The uniformed man introduced himself to the Homicide Division officer as Director Hyun Guk Kong. The interrogating officer was Samuel Guan from the Anti-Corruption Division. And the woman was Lieutenant Ju Seol. Park from Homicide didn't understand how someone from the Anti-Corruption Department would help catch a serial killer. He had been chosen by the director himself, who explained that the guy was very talented. Park hadn't liked Samuel's gaze from the start, even though he treated his colleagues well and sometimes even slacked off at work, but depending on the situation, like the interrogation, he would change completely. Even while smiling, Park could tell his eyes